Chapter 1165. What are Mom and Dad's presents? She was so happy that she wrapped her arms around her brother and rested her chin on her brother's shoulder. Her big eyes sparkled as she looked at her parents and giggled. Tong Tong didn't know what was going on. He turned to look at his sister's pink face and seemed to find it very amusing. He opened his mouth and giggled as well. Yang Yi and Murphy hid the presents in the cabinet in the side hall. They stood up and walked around the side hall. Then each of them came back with a big box. What a big present! She excitedly put down Tong Tong and stood up. She half knelt on the ground and clapped her hands happily. Such big boxes, and there were even two of them. They could definitely hold many beautiful presents. How could this not make Cece so excited that she got carried away? Open it and take a look, Murphy encouraged. She followed her mother's instructions and opened the gift box in her mother's hands. After opening it, she was pleasantly surprised to see bundles of rolled-up cloth. They weren't big, but there were many of them. They were of different shapes and colors. They were neatly stacked in the box and looked like a thick layer of colorful grass. Of course, what attracted Shishi's attention the most wasn't the bundles of cloth, but the box on top of them. Looking at the packaging, it looked like a toy bought from a shopping mall. For example, Tong Tong's robot was packaged like this. However, this box was red and had the unique logo of her father's factory on it. What is this? Shishi curiously held it out and asked her mother in confusion. Murphy smiled and helped Shishi open the box. She took out the small and exquisite children's sewing machine that was made of plastic. It was about the size of a children's kettle and was made of a plastic material. Hello Kitty! Shishi exclaimed in surprise. The machine's body was milky white, with pink buttons, knobs, cover, and other parts. It was also decorated with a red bow. Even if there wasn't a cute Hello Kitty cartoon on the machine, Shishi could still recognize the red bow. Yang Yi used to draw these cartoon characters for her, that Shishi would definitely like. Also, there was a piggy bank with a Hello Kitty printed on it on the bookshelf in Shishi's bedroom. This is a sewing machine. Didn't you see Grandma sewing clothes with this machine before? Murphy said to Shishi with a smile. Not to mention how Shishi had seen it when she was young. When Yang Yi and Murphy's relationship was exposed, his father-in-law and mother-in-law came from America. Then Murphy and Yang Yi rushed back to their hometown to get married. At that time, Shishi's grandmother, Zhou Mingyu, was at home. She used to live above the coffee shop. She asked Yang Yi to prepare a sewing machine and other materials for her. The old lady personally changed clothes for these two tasteless guys. Shishi, of course, recognized the sewing machine. However, the little girl was now attracted by the cute appearance of the children's sewing machine. She happily came over and carefully reached out to touch it, not bothering to respond to her mother's question. Murphy had to wait for Shishi to take a closer look before she described the use of the sewing machine to the little girl. This is just a small sewing machine for children. It's not as powerful as Grandma's, which can make clothes. This machine can only be used to sew some small pieces of cloth. Do you see those? You can use it to sew some beautiful little clothes for your doll. This way, it can be dressed up according to what you want and become more beautiful. Really? This was a big surprise for Shishi. The little girl opened her eyes wide and her mouth was slightly curved. She looked up at her mother excitedly and asked, Mom, then, can I change my sister Aisha into a more beautiful dress? Let me tell you, I don't think Sister Aisha's dress is so beautiful because it's blue. I want to give her a beautiful red dress, so that Sister Aisha will look more beautiful. Murphy was a little confused by Shishi's words. She smiled and said, Of course, as long as you use this sewing machine well, you can make any clothes you like. But it can only be small, and can be worn by dolls, because it's just a children's sewing machine. There was no need to worry about the safety of this sewing machine. First of all, it was very small and had a plastic shell. Shishi could easily pick it up. Secondly, its sewing needle was wrapped in a transparent plastic shell, and had a complicated safety protection device. Unless it was pressed down and attached to the small platform of the sewing area, the sewing needle would not be exposed and pricked by children. When sewing, it was wrapped in a plastic shell, and only a thin layer of cloth could pass through it. Even if it was a tong-tong, it was impossible to insert a finger into it. If the sewing machine's head was pulled up, the safety device would automatically activate, cut off the power, and retract the sewing needle. In addition, although this sewing machine was electric, it used 4 AA batteries to power it. The voltage was very small, so it avoided the danger of children touching the socket. After hearing her mom's explanation, Shishi was happy for a while. But soon, she thought of another problem. The little girl tilted her head and asked, "But Mom, what can I do if I don't know how to make clothes?" "Mom can teach you. Mom has learned a little. Also, if you want to learn how to make super beautiful clothes, you can video chat with Grandma and ask her to teach you," Murphy said to Shishi with a smile. "Yes. Then I can make clothes for my dolls," Shishi said happily, beaming with joy. After all, she was a girl. Shishi was more interested in these fancy things that she could use her hands to think about. When she saw the sewing machine, she forgot about the beautiful diamond necklace on her neck. Maybe it was because she was not used to wearing it, but Shishi felt that the necklace was a little uncomfortable around her neck. She pulled it casually and continued to excitedly talk about the sewing machine with her mother. The little girl's little head was full of all kinds of beautiful clothes. "Shishi, Dad's gift. Open it and see." Yang Yi smiled and said to Shishi, "Okay." Shishi jumped over happily. Who would complain about having too many good things? Shishi opened the gift from her father and cheered in surprise. "Wow, why are there so many? What a cute thing." Shishi was so excited that she didn't know how to describe it. What was it that made Shishi a little incoherent? Yang Yi and Murphy's gifts were actually a combination. Murphy gave a children's sewing machine for sewing clothes and a variety of colored cloth balls. Yang Yi gave a big box of mini accessories that could be used to match the dolls, such as mini sunglasses, mini scarves, mini necklaces, head ornaments, and so on. There were even mini wigs of different colors and hairstyles. Although most of them were made of plastic, the workmanship was definitely exquisite and there were a lot of them. After all, they were divided into different sizes, so Shishi could match them as she pleased. What was interesting was that although there were a lot of accessories and they were very complicated, they were all sorted by Yang Yi's multi-layered, multi-grid, wooden and glass jewelry box. This jewelry box was meticulously made by the factory's master craftsman. It could be seen clearly through the glass panel, and had a complicated opening mechanism. It was not easy to spill or mess it up during the process of use. "Look at these." Yang Yi smiled and took out 2 wooden dolls wearing only t-shirts and shorts from a separate wooden box at the side for Shishi to see. These are also dolls. Shishi felt that today was really a happy day. Although she was not too surprised to see these 2 dolls that didn't have much special features, she still cheered and snuggled in her father's arms, looking at the 2 wooden dolls with him. These 2 wooden dolls were female characters, and they were different from the dolls that Shishi had seen before. The dolls that Shishi had seen before were all cartoon dolls that were very cute. These dolls were more well-proportioned and looked very exquisite. Slender hands, slender legs, big watery eyes, and beautiful facial features. The more Shishi looked at them, the more she felt that they were beautiful. Shishi didn't know that these dolls were called Barbie dolls in her father's previous life. Of course, compared to those Barbie dolls, these dolls lacked beautiful hairstyles and gorgeous clothes. And they also had clothes-fitting clothes that couldn't be taken off, so they looked a little simple. Yang Yi explained to Shishi how to play with these dolls in detail. "Look, these dolls can move their limbs. You can make them do all kinds of poses." Wasn't that right? They could simply stand with their legs apart, or they could raise their legs, bend their knees, and do a side kick. They could simply raise their hands, or they could even raise their hands halfway and do a coquettish pose. The entire doll was like a little person with flexible joints, but there was still a little damping. It could be made for children to do any pose. Wow! This is so fun! Shishi was pleasantly surprised again. She cheered as she hugged a doll and played with it lovingly. Papa, this looks like little brother's robots." Shishi raised her head and said happily to her father as she played with the doll's arms. Tong Tong had been sitting next to his mother the whole time. After looking at so many dolls, he still wasn't interested. His little face was a little confused, as if he couldn't understand why his sister was so excited. At this moment, when he heard his sister calling him, he turned his head to take a look. although the moving doll attracted his attention. Tong Tong soon felt bored and turned his head away. The robots were all hard and muscular, and they even had the texture of steel. This skinny doll didn't look good at all. Yang Yi was slightly proud of himself as he boasted to Xixi. This is much better than little brother's robots. Papa asked the master in the factory to spend a lot of time to develop it. It was specially developed for you as a birthday present. This is an open-ended toy. You can match it with all kinds of decorations, and you can also make all kinds of beautiful clothes for her. Do you like it? Yang Yi's words were half true. Although he did draw the original design, describe the general structure, and asked the master in the factory to design a Barbie doll for Xixi to play with, his original purpose wasn't to give it to Xixi as a birthday present. Moreover, the Barbie doll wasn't completely manufactured yet. For example, the various kinds of clothes hadn't been designed yet, and it was only a prototype. However, in order to beat Lan Xiaokai's present, Yang Yi came up with this idea. He didn't even hesitate to change the Barbie doll's listing plan. He decided to let Xixi have it alone for a year, and then allow the factory to sell it to the public. However, Yang Yi's goal was achieved. Such a flexible toy could fully display Xixi's wild imagination, and it could let Xixi dress it up herself. How could Xixi not like it? Combined with her mother's present, Xixi felt that she was going to explode with happiness today. After hearing her father's story, the little girl stood up happily, hugged her father's neck, and kissed her father's face. Her big crystal eyes were shining with happiness, and she cried out excitedly, "Papa, I like it very much." Hearing Xixi's excited voice, Yang Yi smiled proudly. No matter how beautiful and expensive the necklace was, so what? Only a gift from someone who understood Xixi would be the best gift. Chapter 1166. After Xixi's birthday, all the hustle and bustle seemed to have come to an end. Yang Yi's villa began to calm down because Lu Weisha was going back to China with her parents. The other children couldn't come to play with Xixi every day. Even Lan Xian only came to visit during dinner time. The chubby girl was sadly found out by her mother that she was lazy and didn't do her summer homework. She was locked at home for a week to do her homework. Moreover, Wu Jingjing kept a close watch on her. She set a certain number of pages of homework every day. If she couldn't do it, Lan Xian couldn't come out to play at night. However, it was worth mentioning that Xixi and Lan Xian took the initiative to ask their father that they wanted to participate in the swimming competition. This matter was finally approved by their respective fathers. Yang Yi didn't care whether Xixi could win any awards or not, but he was happy to see that Xixi was willing to bravely try some challenges that she had never experienced before. Lan Xiaokai also had the same idea as Yang Yi. The two of them discussed and asked Lan Xiaokai's secretary to come over and register the two little girls. Lan Xiaokai's secretary filled in the information and put the registration form in his briefcase. When he was about to leave, Lan Xiaokai stopped him. Go to Director Lin and explain the situation. Ask him to help clear the venue during the days of the competition. It's best if only the parents of the children can come in to watch the competition. The other competitions don't matter. We just don't want reporters at the venue these days. Yang Yi and Lan Xiaokai had already discussed this issue. They didn't need to think to know that Xixi's participation in a social competition would definitely cause a sensation, or some reporters would scramble to report about it. Yang Yi's idea was that there was no need to pay attention to those groundless reporters. He couldn't keep Xixi in a greenhouse forever. But Lan Xiaokai had thought it through. He was the sponsor of this competition, and he was very familiar with some of the officials in the city. Getting someone to help him block the reporters from entering the swimming pool was not a big problem. The secretary hurriedly nodded. He glanced at Yang Yi and hesitated for a moment before asking Lan Xiaokai, "Boss, do you want me to ask Chief Lin to make special arrangements?" Yang Yi didn't say anything. He just looked at Lan Xiaokai. Lan Xiaokai waved his hand and said with a smile, "Don't make any arrangements. Yes, you have to tell Chief Lin about this. Say that it's the wishes of the parents. Their children are participating in the competition, just to see the world. They don't want to win any prizes. Just treat them like normal contestants." This was also something that Yang Yi and Lan Xiaokai had discussed. Yang Yi hoped that Xishi's participation in the competition wouldn't be affected by external factors. Whether it was the grouping arrangement or the competition process, there shouldn't be any malpractices. Lan Hao Kai thought so too, so he said to the secretary with a smile, since she's participating in the competition, she should compete fair and square to see what she's lacking. If she still wants to play some tricks, then she might as well not participate. I was the one who gave her the prize money, right? The secretary hurriedly nodded. But even if she signed up for the swimming competition, Lan Xian couldn't use this as an excuse to sneak over to Xishi's house to play with Xishi. She still had to bury her head in her homework. Before dinner in the evening, Wu Jingjing opened the thermostatic swimming pool at home for her to play for a while. Xishi was puzzled about this and asked Lan Xian, "But you can finish your homework quickly. I've already finished it, so I can play." Lan Xian had just complained about her mother gloomily, but now she said with a confused look, "I can't finish it. Xishi, I think I have a lot of summer homework, and it's super difficult. I can't finish it." Wasn't that right? It was rare that Lan Xian couldn't help but doze off when she was doing her homework. How could she finish it quickly? Xishi sighed regretfully and said, "Oh, that's such a pity. I can learn to sew clothes from my grandma. I can sew super beautiful clothes for my doll. Actually, this is just Xishi feeling good about herself. In fact, there's still a lot to learn. But you can't play with me." "Boo-hoo, Xishi, don't say that. I really want to play." Lan Xian couldn't help but shed bitter tears when she heard that her little friend could play freely. It was the end of July, another weekend. Guozi finally came back from Guangdong province. Although he took a plane, it was already 4 o'clock in the afternoon when he returned home after sending Ding Xiang back to school. Guozi hurriedly dropped his luggage and shouted, "I'm so hot and sweaty." Then he got into the bathroom to take a shower. When he came out after drying his hair, Tan Huizhen and Guozian were sitting on the sofa and watching TV. Guozi's luggage, which had been left in the living room and hadn't had time to tidy up, had been taken into his room by Tan Huizhen. "Guozian, don't you have to study in the afternoon? You're still sitting here and watching TV." Guozi sat on the armrest of the sofa and asked with a smile. "It's none of your business. Go away, move your big butt away." Guozian shouted with a look of disgust. In fact, Guozi had lost a lot of weight. Except for his face that was still a little round, his body was approaching the standard direction. He was 1.77 meters tall and weighed more than 80 kilograms. He could only be said to be slightly fat. Obviously, in addition to Ding Xiang supervising him to exercise every day, it was also due to him running around in the countryside. When he came back just now, Tan Huizhen said with heartache that Guozi was so tan that he was almost as tanned as the current leader of the township cadres. Guozi stood up resentfully and was about to go to his room to pack his luggage when Tan Huizhen stopped him. "That Ding Xiang is also back, right?" Guozi was a little surprised and inexplicably nervous, but his acting skills were displayed. He said as if nothing had happened, "She's back. But why are you asking about her? Didn't you arrange to have lunch at home tomorrow? She's already back at school." Tan Huizhen chuckled and said, "What else is there to say? Didn't your dad ask you to invite Ding Xiang over for lunch tomorrow and ask her about Taobao Shopping Center? I'm just concerned." Guozi suddenly understood and said with a smile, Oh, Sister Ding Xiang also came back from Guangdong province because of this. Otherwise, she wouldn't have time. It's all because I'm familiar with her, and she respects you and Dad very much, so she specially took 2 days off and came all the way from the countryside." Guozian listened to Guozi's compliments and couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth. Tan Huizhen still didn't reveal any flaws. She smiled and said, "That's true. It's not easy to come back. Go back and tell her to have a good rest tonight." Guozi nodded without hesitation and said with a smile, "Got it, Mom. I'll tell her." After that, Guozi went back to his room to pack his luggage. He even stuck his head out and said, "Guozian, where's the remote control for the air conditioner in my room? Did you use it in your room again?" Guozi didn't notice that behind him, Tan Huizhen looked at his back meaningfully. Sure enough, he went back and still contacted her at night. Chapter 1167. On Sunday morning, Guozi was about to sneak out of the house, but just as he was about to change his shoes, Tan Huijin coincidentally walked out of the bedroom with a piece of clothing that she was folding. With a faint smile on her face, she casually asked, "Z, are you going out?" Guozi was startled. As he jumped to put on his shoes, he smiled. "Yes, Sister Ding Xiang is here. I'm going to pick her up. The road here is a little complicated." Tan Huijin did not say anything. She only smiled and turned to return to the bedroom. Guozi did not think too much about it. He went to the entrance of the compound and picked up Ding Xiang, who was driving over. However, they were not in a hurry to go in. Guozi jumped into the car that was parked by the roadside and slammed the door. "Wow, why are you dressed so beautifully today?" Guozi looked at Ding Xiang in the driver's seat with a pleasantly surprised expression. The admiration in his eyes made Ding Xiang shyly tug at her skirt. Ding Xiang had indeed put in a lot of effort to dress up today. Not only did she wear a dress that she rarely wore, she even tied up her hair. Her black hair was slightly curly, giving off a refreshing feeling. "Do I really look good?" Ding Xiang pursed her lips. She was a little embarrassed as she placed her hands on her legs and asked shyly, "Huan, help me pick this out." She even helped me tie up my hair. She said that I have been tanned recently, so I have to dress up less obviously. "Yes." Guozi nodded vigorously as he looked at Ding Xiang. Although Guozi forgot to use flowery words to describe himself, the love in his eyes could not be concealed. Ding Xiang suddenly felt that it was worth it to wake up early in the morning and let Yang Huan take her to try on clothes. Ding Xiang looked really good today. It wasn't that Guozi believed that beauty was in the eye of the beholder. Ding Xiang's tan skin looked healthy and natural in the yellow dress. Ding Xiang's dress was neither old-fashioned nor ostentatious. It was a simple and elegant style that was somewhere between fashionable and conservative. It gave people the feeling that she was a lady from a wealthy family. Coupled with Ding Xiang's already pretty face and her slightly permed hair that appeared even more exquisite, if Ding Xiang were to walk on the streets like this, there would definitely be a lot of people turning their heads. But won't it be too obvious if I wear it like this? When Ding Xiang was happy, she would still maintain a trace of calmness. Soon she asked worriedly, "What if Auntie suspects?" "No way. Why would my mother suspect anything? Your status is different now. You can even chat with my dad on an equal footing. Isn't it normal to dress well?" Guozi joked. "What equal footing? Don't spout nonsense. Uncle asked me because he cares about the farmers in the countryside of Jiangcheng," Ding Xiang said angrily. "Or agree to their relationship." If she hadn't met Ding Xiang and only knew her background, Tan Huijin definitely wouldn't want a poor village girl with no status to be her daughter-in-law. But the problem was that she had met Ding Xiang, and Tan Huijin didn't deny that every time she met Ding Xiang, this hard-working and virtuous girl always left a good impression on her, just like now. But Tan Huijin was in a dilemma. After all, Ding Xiang's family background wasn't compatible with hers. Moreover, she was a few years older than Guozi, therefore, Tan Huijin couldn't make a decision at all. There was another reason. That was, Guo Zhengyan was now asking for help. Tan Huijin had to consider whether it would affect Guo Zhengyan's work when dealing with family matters. If she revealed her cards and had a disagreement with Ding Xiang, or even Yang Yi, it would be awkward if Guo Zhengyan wanted to cooperate with Yang Yi's Sahara Taba Mall or Fun Talks. Therefore, Tan Huijin had been keeping this matter in her heart. At noon, Guo Zhengyan came back with a briefcase. Ding Xiang and Guozi were watching TV with Tan Huijin in the living room. Of course, they were still talking about Guozi's jokes in the countryside of Guangdong province. "Little Ding is here? Sit down. You don't have to get up." Guo Zhengyan smiled and waved his hand. He asked Ding Xiang to sit down and talk. He also sat down on the sofa next to Tan Huijin. Tan Huijin turned off the TV and got up to pour tea for Guo Zhengyan. Ding Xiang also wanted to help, but at this moment, Tan Huijin didn't help her. She smiled and said, "You talk to Uncle. He has something to ask you." Ding Xiang had to sit back. She sat halfway on the sofa and looked at Guo Zhengyan. She was so nervous that her forehead was sweating. "Don't be nervous. I just want to know how you teach those farmers to open online stores to sell fruits in the countryside of Guangdong province. Guo Zhengyan took a sip of tea, put down the cup, waved his hand and smiled. Uncle Guo, we are currently doing it in the following 4 steps. First of all, before entering the village, we will communicate with the local government and the village cadres. Although the provincial government of Guangdong province has given us a lot of support, sufficient communication is still very important. We have to let them know what our Sahara Rural Development Foundation does, and clarify our non-profit nature. At the same time, we will show them with practical cases so that they can see that the internet and agriculture can make farmers' benefits more guaranteed and improved. Ding Xiang carefully explained to Guo Zhengyan. She also prepared some printed pictures and statistical data. She handed them over to Guo Zhengyan and explained in a very organized manner. Obviously, Ding Xiang's progress in the past 6 months was also very great. Not to mention anything else, her eloquence had reached a very high level under constant training. In addition, she knew Taobao and the work she did like the back of her hand. After she spoke, her confidence suddenly improved the temperament of this girl-next-door girl by a lot. Tan Huijin couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly. She had a new level of respect for Ding Xiang, who was talking with Guo Zhengyan. Chapter 1168. Ding Xiang had lunch and was about to go back. Guo Zi also followed her out. He said that Yang Yi had something to talk to him about in the coffee shop in the afternoon, so he took Ding Xiang's car back to school. Tan Huijin didn't say anything. Before lunch, Guo Zi accompanied Ding Xiang to talk to her father. Most of the time, they talked about the significance of Taobao Mall to farmers and self-employed people. However, when it came to Guo Zi's hope that Ding Xiang and the volunteer team she was in charge of to create a set of publicity and training programs for farmers in Jiang City, Guo Zi actually sided with outsiders and fought for benefits for Ding Xiang. For example, the Jiang City government's human and material support, taking the initiative to help more people join the volunteer team in Jiang City's universities, and so on. Tan Huijin saw Guo Zi's favoritism. At noon, when Guo Zhengyan wanted to rest, Tan Huijin couldn't help but ask, "What do you think of Ding Xiang?" Ding Xiang? Not bad. She's a person who can do things. Perhaps he thought that Tan Huijin might not understand, so Guo Zhengyan snorted softly and continued. As the person in charge, her leadership ability is still a bit lacking. She doesn't have the courage to speak, but this child does things that are reassuring. It's only been a few months, but she has already understood the business thoroughly. She can answer everything clearly and logically. Moreover, she is also patient enough to do things that seem to have no benefits. The grassroots need more talents like this. Tan Huijin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She pushed his arm and said angrily, "I'm asking you about her character and quality. Why are you still concerned about whether other people are talents or not? Moreover, what kind of talent they are has nothing to do with you. She's working for Yang Yi, not for you." Guo Zhengyan heard this and frowned slightly. He couldn't help but raise one of his eyelids and glance at Tan Huijin. He asked doubtfully, "What are you thinking? Do you think Ding Xiang is very outstanding and want to set her up with someone? These idle Mrs. XX always like to introduce people to other people." Guo Zhengyan often heard about it, but he remembered that Tan Huijin didn't have this problem. Tan Huijin said unhappily, "Who else can I set her up with? Can't you tell? I don't know when Zi got together with Ding Xiang." Guo Zhengyan was no longer sleepy. He sat up in surprise. "What? What else? You only care about asking about Taobao. Where did your judgment go when you worked for the Discipline Inspection Commission?" Tan Huijin took out her phone and said angrily, "Look, this is what Sister Ke showed me. She said that they went to watch a movie and were filmed." Guo Zhengyan took the glasses from the bedside table, put them on, and looked at the phone carefully. "It's been a long time. I was afraid of delaying your work, so I didn't say anything." Now that Tan Huijin finally said it out loud, she felt much better, but she still said worriedly, "I don't know how to deal with this matter. In fact, I like Ding Xiang very much, and I'm quite willing to introduce her to others, but now it's Zi. I think she's a little older than Zi, and you know the situation in the family." Guo Zhengyan pondered in silence, while Tan Huijin rambled on about some of her worries. But Tan Huijin was unhappy after a while. She said angrily, "Why am I the one talking? Tell me what you think." At this time, Guo Zhengyan handed the phone back to Tan Huijin and shook his head gently. "What do you mean?" Tan Huijin asked, puzzled. "You don't agree?" Guo Zhengyan said slowly. "It's not that I don't agree, but I think you don't have to interfere." "What do you mean?" Guo Zhengyan thought for a while and said, "Let's talk about Ding Xiang first. After a few contacts, I can see that she's a steady person. In terms of personality, she complements Z. Z's personality is a little floaty, like a kite. He needs someone to pull him at all times so that he won't go astray." "That's true. Ding Xiang also knows how to take care of people. She can cook well, and she's also very sensible and proactive. She's not as pretentious as other girls. You don't know, but the son of Old Wang from the Housing and Urban Rural Bureau married a rich girl. She doesn't do anything at home. It's good that she has a nanny, but her mother-in-law asked her to help carry things and said that she was mistreating her. She's always making trouble at home," Tan Huijin said with a smile. Guo Zhengyan was helpless. He could only wait for her to finish talking about the family's problems before continuing his analysis. "I can't say which kind of daughter-in-law is good now. There are also people who live in harmony with each other. But according to what you said, Ding Xiang does have Ding Xiang's advantages and disadvantages. One is that she's a little older, and the other is the problem of family composition." Tan Huijin's face became gloomy again, and she nodded lightly. In fact, Guo Zhengyan was just repeating what Tan Huijin had said. Guo Zhengyan, who came from the front line of discipline inspection, was especially disgusted with those corrupt officials and the nepotism of big families. Naturally, he wouldn't care too much about family background. Guo Zhengyan continued, "But now I'm going to talk about the second reason why I don't recommend you to interfere. You also know what kind of character your son has. Z has been like this since he was young. Once he sets his mind on something, he will do it wholeheartedly. Even 10 cows can't pull him back. Just like how you don't want him to be an actor, he secretly went to take the art exam. Even if he didn't pass, he promised to study properly. Then he secretly went to shoot a movie. Do you think you can stop him?" Tan Huijin fell silent. Young people have their own ideas. The more you interfere, the more rebellious he will be. It's like that when it comes to filming a movie, and it's also like that when it comes to marriage. If you stop him from dating Ding Xiang, do you think he will listen to you obediently? Guo Zhengyan asked. In fact, a few years ago, Guo Zhengyan wouldn't have said such a thing. He was furious that Guo Ziyi didn't listen to him, and went to the entertainment industry by himself. It was also because Guo Ziyi had made some achievements, especially because the variety show The Limit Challenge, which was full of positive energy, was now well known. Some leaders in the city and province knew that Guo Ziyi was Guo Zhengyan's son, and they often praised Guo Ziyi in front of Guo Zhengyan. That was why Guo Zhengyan, who was proud of himself, gradually changed his view of Guo Ziyi's improper work. In addition, Guo Ziyi was now doing some public service work, and had made achievements that Guo Zhengyan recognized. That was why Guo Zhengyan finally stopped giving Guo Ziyi attitude. As for Ding Xiang, Guo Zhengyan still admired such a down-to-earth person. To a certain extent, Guo Zhengyan felt that Ding Xiang was better than Guo Ziyi. He even felt a little regretful. Why was Ding Xiang not his own child? He could have used Guo Ziyi to exchange for her. Therefore, his analysis now was also slightly biased. This was something he himself did not notice. "You mean I don't have to interfere? Just let them date?" Tan Huijin asked in surprise. "Instead of rushing for results, it's better to wait and see," Guo Zhengyan said gently. "If they date for a while and find that they are not suitable, they will break up on their own. Then, our interference won't hurt their relationship." "But what if they feel that they are suitable?" Tan Huijin frowned slightly. "If they can love each other and make each other better, just like how you gave up your family's business and accompanied me to the capital, taking care of me and silently supporting me, then what's the point of them being together? Ding Xiang may not have a good family background, but didn't I also walk step by step from a poor boy?" Guo Zhengyan gently pulled Tan Huijin's hand and said softly, "Hey, don't be so mushy. You're already 70 or 80 years old. Tan Huijian said angrily as she slapped his hand away with a smile on her face. In the university town of Tingshan district, Guazi, who was chatting with Ding Xiang in a coffee shop, didn't know that his parents' thoughts had changed. He didn't lie to his family. In the afternoon, he did have an appointment with Yang Yi to talk about something. Yang Yi wanted to talk to him about something. Ring ring. The wind chime at the door was moved by the door, and a pleasant bell rang. Then Xishi's crisp voice came, "Hey Uncle Xiaogua. Sister Ding Xiang. Hee, I missed you so much." He turned around and saw a cute little girl with a swaying ponytail and a cheerful smile. She cheered and threw herself at them. Guazi quickly bent down and picked up Xishi. Ding Xiang handed the coffee pot to Feng Tang, wiped her hands, and greeted them with a smile. "Xishi, I missed you too." No, you didn't come to my birthday party," Xishi complained in Guazi's arms. Xanair was also very angry, because she missed Sister Ding Xiang's cake so much. Chapter 1169. Although Xishi was complaining, the deep longing in her words made Ding Xiang very happy. She reached out to shake Xishi's hand and said with a gentle smile, "How about I make a cake for you now? In a while, you can bring it home to eat and give some to Xanair." Xishi was no longer the little girl she used to be. Guazi was not as strong as Yang Yi. After hugging her for a while, he could not hold on any longer. He quickly put Xishi down and secretly shook his sore arms behind him. Xishi did not notice. She was focused on Sister Ding Xiang. She giggled and said, "Okay, Sister Ding Xiang, I'll make a cake with you." Ding Xiang looked at Yang Yi and Murphy. After getting Yang Yi's nod, she smiled and reached out her hand. "Come on, let's make a cake." Xishi put her hand in Sister Ding Xiang's. Although the little girl was not as childish as before, she still giggled and skipped into the bar with Ding Xiang. However, Tong Tong saw all this from his mother's arms. He thought that his sister was going to do something fun again. He anxiously reached out his little hand and muttered, "Sister, sister." Xishi's ears were very sensitive. When she heard her brother's voice, she looked back and said in a clear voice, "Hey, Sister Ding Xiang, my brother also wants to come and make a cake with us. Can he?" Murphy could not persuade Tong Tong, who was struggling to get down, so she had to put him down. The little guy swayed his little butt and ran to his sister's side. Murphy smiled at Ding Xiang apologetically. Then she said to Xishi and Tong Tong, "Okay, we'll all go and watch Sister Ding Xiang make a cake. You two can't move around. You can only watch." Murphy, of course, followed them. She sat in front of the bar and smiled as she watched the two little guys and Ding Xiang squeeze in and out of the narrow bar. Sugar Cube was afraid of squeezing the two little guys, so she quickly made room for them. She smiled and took the coffee pot to pour coffee for Yang Yi and the others. Because it was summer vacation, the coffee shop was relatively quiet. There were no customers in the afternoon. Yang Yi and Guazi found a booth at random and sat down. "Have you finished recording the second season of the Limit Challenge?" Yang Yi asked with a smile. "How's your schedule for the second half of the year?" Guazi scratched his head a little embarrassedly and said hesitantly, "I haven't accepted any projects yet because Sister Ding Xiang still has to work in Guangdong. I think she's working hard, so I want to spend more time with her. I'll go back to work after I'm done with this." Guazi was a little worried that Yang Yi would scold him for being sentimental, but he obviously worried too much. Yang Yi himself had turned down a lot of invitations for his family. How could he blame Guazi for such a small problem? Therefore Yang Yi touched his chin, thought for a while and said, "Actually the foundation is still in the initial stage, so it's a little difficult. After this summer vacation, we'll have some experience, so we don't need Ding Xiang to do it herself. I asked her to go to the foundation, mainly to be a manager for me." Guazi nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, Sister Ding Xiang also said that this summer vacation, because we recruited a group of volunteers to help, so things are more intensive. After the volunteers go back, the rest will be the professional trainers, so the work will be more regular." Yang Yi would find a chance to talk to Ding Xiang about the foundation in the future. Now he asked Guazi to come over mainly because a new movie was in preparation. This movie is expected to be filmed in Jinling City and Jiangqing City, because we are currently leveling an island that we bought. This island is also going to be used to build an amusement park in the future. I thought of such a script, and a considerable part of the shooting needs to be done on this island, so I discussed with director Du this movie is going to be filmed in September or October this year. Yang Yi said to Guozi, the core of this movie, or rather the soul of this movie, is only one person, and that is the male lead. Whether the movie is good or not, and whether it can move people's hearts, all depends on the performance of the male lead. When Guozi heard this, his eyes couldn't help but sparkle. He looked at Yang Yi excitedly, but of course his heart was also excited and nervous. Needless to say, all of Yang Yi's works had the potential to create miracles. Even though The Shawshank Redemption seemed to be facing a Waterloo at the moment, what was surprising was that even though the movie's box office wasn't high, its ratings remained high. Some friends even stirred up public opinion, saying that Yang Yi or Wu Yian had paid the internet water army to boost the ratings, but later, the National Film Association intervened in the investigation and cleared Yang Yi's name. Therefore, not only Guozi, but every actor wanted to act in Yang Yi's works, and Guozi had not been able to enjoy the treatment of the male lead in Yang Yi's movies or TV series for a long time, except for the initial mini-movie Fairy Tale. Now that Yang Yi had revealed this intention, how could Guozi not be excited? However, he was also a little nervous. Yang Yi had not expressed his opinion yet, and Guozi also knew that Yang Yi usually gave the casting rights to a director he trusted. Guozi did not know if he could be the male lead in the end. Yang Yi had also considered this problem. In terms of talent, Guozi was far from being able to act in a big production that required him to act alone. In terms of acting skills, Guozi had already practiced, but he still lacked sufficient experience. Yang Yi was a little worried about whether Guozi could express such complicated inner thoughts alone. If it were an actor he did not know, Yang Yi would definitely not be willing to let him act in this movie based on his qualifications. However, Guozi was his brother after all. Yang Yi did not want to let the fertile water flow to an outsider's field. For such a big movie, Yang Yi still wanted to give priority to Guozi. Yang Yi took out a document wrapped in craft paper from the bag he had brought over, and said somewhat seriously, "You have one chance to audition. I asked director Du to arrange an audition for you before the casting, which is in late August. If you meet the requirements of the script, then the lead role will be given to you. If not, then there's no other way." Yang Yi did not say it clearly, but obviously, he still gave Guozi a lot of convenience because Guozi could see the complete script now. He still had a month to figure out the script and practice. If he still could not perform to the standard of the movie, then he could only say that he was not good enough. Guozi also understood this point and nodded gratefully. He took out the script and glanced at the name of the movie. Then he said seriously to Yang Yi, "Brother Yang, don't worry. For the next month, I will be in the countryside of Guangdong province. As long as I have time, I will watch this, The Truman Show, and practice hard. I will definitely not let you down." Yang Yi smiled and said, "I also hope that you can act in this movie, because if you read the script, you will know that if you act well as the male lead, it will be easy to be outstanding. Who knows, you might even have the chance to win the Best Actor award." At the bar, the atmosphere was not so oppressive. Xi and Tong Tong looked around curiously as they watched Sister Ding Xiang make cakes. Tong Tong was too short, so he was arranged to sit on a bar chair that had been moved in. His two small hands grabbed the edge of the table, and he looked very serious. At this time, Xi was stirring the egg mixture with a whisk. Although she had been stirring for almost 10 minutes, the whisk was still buzzing, but Tong Tong and Xi were watching attentively. Especially Tong Tong, he felt that it was very magical. His eyes were wide open and his mouth was slightly open. Cici, on the other hand, didn't stop talking. She stood at the side and kept asking questions excitedly. "Sister Ding Xiang, is this white thing cream?" "No, the cream is made from milk and some other ingredients. But as I told you just now, we have egg white here, so it's egg paste, not cream. The egg paste is used to make the cakes under the cream." Ding Xiang patiently answered Cici's questions. "Okay. I thought it was cream." Xi said regretfully, "I like cakes with cream. Sure, when our cakes are done, We can put some cream on them. Ding Xiang said with a smile as she turned off the egg beater, pulled out the plug, cleaned it, and hung it on a high shelf. Hey, I have to hang this up. I can't let you touch it because it's a little dangerous. At this time, Tong Tong lowered his head and looked at the big basin in front of him that Sister Ding Xiang had just put down. It was filled with freshly stirred egg white cream. It looks delicious. Chapter 1170. Little Momo stared at the egg paste that looked a little like cream. Even on his sister's birthday, his mother rarely gave him too much cream. The cream on the cake that was placed in front of the little guy was usually scraped with a layer of cream. Therefore, when the little guy looked at the egg paste, he thought of delicious cream and licked his lips greedily. Let's try it. There's so much cream. It would be a waste if we don't eat it. Tong Tong reached his right hand into the bowl and stirred the egg paste. Then, he withdrew his hand and looked expectantly, ready to lick his fingers. At the bar counter, Shishi stood across from Sister Ding Xiang with Tong Tong between them. She rested her elbows on the counter and asked Sister Ding Xiang all sorts of questions excitedly. Although she did not need to learn how to make a cake, Shishi was curious. Why did Sister Ding Xiang separate the eggs? Why was the yolk different from the egg white? Why did she put in the white flour? The little girl had so many questions that she was about to ask 100,000 questions again. However, at this moment, Tong Tong's little hand that was covered in cream brushed past Shishi's face. The little girl was stunned. She looked down and saw her brother's hand moving towards his mouth. Aya! Brother, you can't eat this. Sisi reacted quickly. She cried out in surprise as she reached out to pull little Momo's little hand. This is still raw. Sister Ding Xiang said that you can only eat it after it's baked. Tong Tong was only 1 centimeter away from the cream. He stuck out his little tongue, but even if he moved his head closer, he could not lick it because his sister had already pulled his little hand away. Woo-woo. Tong Tong became anxious. Mommy's sister is right. You can't eat this. Murphy quickly took a tissue and leaned over to wipe Tong Tong's fingers clean. Ding Xiang also moved the bowl away and smiled. Don't be so anxious. Wait a while after the cake is done. I can give it to you. Yes. Shishi nodded in agreement. She giggled and reached out to rub Tong Tong's head. However, how could Tong Tong be willing to let the duck that was already in his mouth fly away? The little guy wriggled unhappily on the chair, whimpering as he complained. His little finger pointed at the stainless steel basin. His little mouth puckered, and tears welled up in his eyes. Who knew how wronged he was? Just a little more, and the little guy was about to cry. Mommy, don't be anxious. Wait for a while, okay? Ding Xiang said in a panic. She had never taken care of such a small child, and did not know how to coax him. She felt a little helpless. Murphy was ready to carry Tong Tong out and coax him. She didn't want his willfulness to disturb Ding Xiang when she was making the cake. Shishi turned her head, her beautiful big eyes sweeping across the bar. Suddenly, she happily pulled Tong Tong's arm and said in a cheerful voice, Hee, it's okay. Little brother, don't cry. I know a good thing to eat. Tong Tong's sad mood was brewing, and he was about to cry. However, he was unexpectedly pulled by his sister, and his mood was interrupted. What good thing? Why is my sister talking so happily? Why isn't my sister comforting me like my mother, and that beautiful big sister? Tong Tong was still puckered his little mouth. With tears in his eyes, he stared blankly at his enthusiastic sister. His little head was a little confused, and he foolishly looked at his sister who was picking up a small candy jar for customers. This is also candy. Shishi opened the candy jar, reached in with her little finger, and picked up a few grains of white granulated sugar. She put them in her mouth and excitedly tasted them. Then, she smiled and reported to her little brother, Yes, it's candy. It's sweet. Tong Tong blinked his eyes. His little mouth was no longer puckered. Unknowingly, it opened slightly, revealing his rosy little lips. He looked at his sister in a daze. You should try it too. She giggled. She didn't mind that her fingers were stained with her saliva. She picked up some more white granulated sugar from the candy jar, pulled Tong Tong's little hand, and rubbed it on his palm. Yes, there's still some on my fingers, she mumbled to herself after she withdrew her hand, looked at her fingers, and licked them decisively. Tong Tong followed suit. He poked the sparkling white granulated sugar on his palm with his finger, and licked it himself. He seemed to find it delicious. Instantly, the cloudy expression on the little guy's face turned cheerful. His big eyes beamed with joy. Hee hee hee. Tong Tong waved his two little hands happily, and lost himself in his sister's embrace. Murphy and Ding Xiang, who was stirring the egg yolk and flour with a spatula, looked at each other helplessly and smiled. Ding Xiang let Shishi take Tong Tong to eat the white granulated sugar a few times before she reminded him. You can't eat too much sugar. If you eat too much sugar, your teeth will fall out again. It was only then that Shishi realized what she was doing and quickly put the jar of white granulated sugar back. Tong Tong stretched out his hand to take more, but Shishi proactively pressed down Tong Tong's little hand. She pointed at the hole left behind by her missing front tooth and explained to her little brother, "Little brother, you can't eat sugar anymore. Mom said that if you eat too much sugar, your teeth will fall out. If your teeth fall out, you'll be like big sister. You won't look good anymore." Now that Tong Tong had tasted some sweetness, he was not as anxious as before. Therefore, although his sister did not give him any sugar, the little guy did not cry. However, Shishi's black tooth hole was still obvious. Tong Tong giggled, shrunk his little head, and reached out his hand to cover his sister's mouth. "No. Big sister, I don't understand what you mean, but don't use it to scare me." Shishi probably felt that her little brother had misunderstood something, so she anxiously explained, "Little brother, it's not like that. Let me tell you, big sister didn't lose her teeth because she ate sugar. Daddy said that I'm going to grow new teeth. Here, a tooth that fell out will grow new teeth, and then it will become prettier. That is, when you grow up, you'll grow new teeth too." Tong Tong was stunned by his sister's words. He did not understand, but his sister kept talking, and Tong Tong did not have a chance to interrupt, so he could only stay there in a daze. "Okay, big sister, you can say whatever you want." "Okay, big sister, Sister Ding Xiang will make the cake. Little brother, let Mom take care of him." Murphy smiled and reached out to carry Tong Tong out. Shishi looked at Tong Tong, still wanting to continue, and said regretfully, "Okay." However, Sister Ding Xiang's cake was still very interesting, so Shishi went up to her excitedly. After a while, the little girl helped Sister Ding Xiang arrange the beautiful paper cups, and then she excitedly watched as Sister Ding Xiang poured the batter into the paper cups. However, when she saw that Sister Ding Xiang only poured 70% to 80% of the batter into each paper cup, she blinked her eyes in confusion. "That's not right. That's not right. How uncomfortable it looks." Thus, the little girl tilted her head and watched for a while, and could not help but cry out, "Hey, it's not enough. You only poured a little, but Sister Ding Xiang, you still want to pour more. Is it because you haven't done enough?" Ding Xiang smiled and shook her head. "No, it's because this cupcake will expand by itself after we bake it, so we can't fill it to the brim. We have to leave some space for it to expand, and then it will look very good." Chapter 1171. Go in high spirits and return with a full load. This sentence could not be more appropriate to describe Cece's state when she returned home in the evening. Moreover, not only did she and little mommy come back with the cake made by Sister Ding Xiang in a small box in their hands, the siblings' little bellies were also fully loaded. When they passed by Lan Xian's villa, Yang Yu recalled how Lan Xian had braved the scorching sun to deliver a big bag of water chestnuts when she had just returned from her hometown. He stopped the car and turned around to smile at Shishi. "Shishi, do you want to deliver the cake to Xian first?" Cece came to her senses and a joyful smile blossomed on her little face. She replied in a clear and melodious voice, "Okay. I want to give it to Xian. She'll definitely like it." Yang Yi parked the car and opened the door to get out. He waved at Shishi, who jumped out of the car, and prepared to bring her in. Murphy rolled down the car window and asked with a smile, "I don't have to get out, right?" Yang Yi waved his hand. "You and Huawei can wait in the car for a while. We'll come out after we send the cake in." However, Tong Tong saw his sister bring the box down with her. He remembered that there was a delicious cake in the box. Although Tong Tong was full, the cake was meant for him to eat at night, right? Therefore Tong Tong was curious. He reached out his hand from the child's safety seat and asked his mother to get out of the car with his sister. Murphy had no choice but to bring him out of the car with her. In the surveillance footage, Wu Jingjing was the one who opened the door for Yang Yi and the rest. Just like a few days ago, Lan Xian was cooped up at home to do her summer homework. Wu Jingjing even deliberately didn't go anywhere and stayed at home the whole day to supervise the little girl who liked to slack off. Xian, I brought you a cake. She carried the box and ran in front happily. As soon as she entered the villa, she saw Lan Xian, who had been called out by Wu Jingjing from her bedroom. She was probably dozing off while doing her homework. She raised her arm happily and picked up the cake box to show Lan Xian. Sister Ding Xiang made this. Hearing that there was a cake, Lan Xian, who had been exhausted by her summer homework and seemed to have lost some weight, finally perked up. Her little nose twitched, and she moved closer to Shishi. She looked at the box in Shishi's hand expectantly and asked, "Really? What kind of cake is it?" Shishi put the box on the coffee table. Then she opened it and giggled. "It's that kind of small cake. Xian, let me tell you, because I told Sister Ding Xiang that you missed her so much that she didn't come to my birthday. You missed her cake so much, so Sister Ding Xiang made us a cake. I even saw Sister Ding Xiang making a cake." Tong Tong stood beside his two sisters. Although he didn't have much of a presence, the little guy still propped his two little hands on the coffee table and looked at the cake box eagerly. Why did his sister bring it to Sister Xian? Okay, it's Sister Xian. Sister Xian can eat it. She can eat a little bit. Tong Tong was already full. Now that he didn't have much of an appetite, he tilted his little head and didn't realize the seriousness of the problem. Lan Xian responded with yes, yes, yes. Her attention was focused on the 4 cupcakes that were neatly arranged in the box. She couldn't help but reach into the box and poke it. Because this batch was baked later, it was still a little warm. Lan Xian immediately felt it. It was a delicious feeling. Wow. Wow. The little girl shouted happily. It's a hot cake. Shishi was interrupted, but it didn't matter. Shishi was almost done talking, and she could continue Lan Xian's topic. Shishi was stunned for a moment, then she said with a smile, "Yes, it's hot. Xian, let me tell you, when we were at the coffee shop, the freshly baked cake was super delicious. You can directly tear it open. It's hot, soft, and super fragrant. It's even better than my birthday cake." When Lan Xian heard this, she suddenly felt a little regretful. She took out a small cake from the box and complained, "Shishi, why didn't you take me with you? I also want to eat freshly baked cake. It's even better." Wu Jingjing, who was talking to Yang Yi and Murphy, heard her complaint. She raised her eyebrows and looked over angrily. She said, "You still have the nerve to ask why I didn't take you with me? How much homework did you do today?" Lan Xian held the cake and suddenly felt guilty. She shrank her head and muttered softly, "I'll finish it." "You said you'll finish it. I checked an hour ago, and I didn't finish half of it today. So you can't go out to play." Wu Jingjing looked at Yang Yi helplessly and smiled. Because the two families were very close, she didn't treat him as an outsider. She lectured him sternly as usual. "After you finish this cake, go back and continue doing your homework. You can eat it when you finish it." In other words, she wouldn't be able to eat the next 3 cakes? Lan Xian became anxious. She carefully held the cake with both hands, afraid that she would drop it. Her eyes were red as she anxiously stomped her feet and said in a choked voice, "No, you're bullying me. The cake won't taste good when it's cold." Wu Jingjing was used to Lan Xian's little tricks. If she relented, this little girl would immediately stop crying and eat the cake proudly. Wu Jingjing laughed snappily and said, "Stop pretending. I'm already being generous by letting you eat one today. You've only done so little homework today, and you still have the nerve to say that the cake won't taste good when it's cold? Why don't we let Shishi bring the cake back and let Shishi and Huahua eat it?" Lan Xian suddenly became nervous. She hurriedly opened her arms and hugged the cake. Tears fell from her eyes as she cried sadly, "No, no, my cake. Ooh." This girl's posture seemed to say that if you want to touch my cake, you'll have to step over my body first. Are they quarreling? Tong Tong felt that the atmosphere was a little tense. He hid behind his sister in fear and pulled on his sister's clothes. When he heard his name, he buried his head in his sister's back and didn't dare to move. He was afraid that he would be scolded too. As for the cake, let's talk about it later. Xishi's focus wasn't on Lan Xian's homework. When she heard Wu Jingjing's words, she blinked and hurriedly waved her hand and said, "There's no need. Because these cakes are for Xian Air. We still have another box." Yang Yi and Murphy hurriedly comforted Wu Jingjing, who was about to explode from anger. Yang Yi smiled and stroked Lan Xian's back. He said, Okay, don't cry. I've talked to your mother. The cake is yours, but you have to promise Daddy Yang that you'll listen to your mother today and finish your homework, okay? Lan Xian pursed her lips and blinked her eyes sadly. She said sullenly, I can't finish. She still couldn't bear to let go of the box. Why can't you finish it? Yang Yi smiled and said, How about this? You bring your homework here, and Daddy Yang will guide you. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me. When you finish your homework, we'll have dinner, okay? When you finish, Daddy Yang will cook a few delicious dishes to reward you. Yang Yi wasn't worried because everyone had eaten a lot of cake and wasn't very hungry. Dinner could be delayed a little. Lan Xian seemed to be a little more energetic after hearing this. She raised her teary eyes and pouted her small mouth as she asked, Really? Really? Cece giggled and jumped up and down as she shouted, Xian Air summer homework is really easy to do, really. Well, Xian Air, you see, even Shishi is encouraging you. You should work harder. Let's see if this big tiger is really that scary, okay? Yang Yi said with a smile. Lan Xian recovered a little. She nodded gently, then pouted her small mouth and put forward a small condition. Then I want to eat the cake first. It won't taste good when it's cold. Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Okay, you eat it. But you have to share some with your mother. You made her angry just now. Go and coax her and tell her not to be angry. You should also eat a cake. She's very strict with your studies. It's for your own good, right? She could eat cake, and there would be delicious food to look forward to tonight. Under such circumstances, Lan Xian's little temper had disappeared. When she wasn't angry with her mother, Lan Xian was very sensible. Moreover, with Yang Yi's gentle guidance, the little girl obediently nodded to Yang Yi. After wiping her tears, she picked a cake that she hadn't eaten before and turned to run to her mother. Chapter 1172. Xian Air, do you want me to teach you how to solve this question? You've been looking at it for a long time. The sun set rather late in the summer. When the two young ladies were sitting in front of the desk in the side hall to do their homework, the sky outside the window was still burning with a purplish-red glow. The scenery was so beautiful that even Lan Xian was a little mesmerized by it. After a short while of doing her homework, she became distracted again. But fortunately, the conscientious Shishi was beside her. Lan Xian came back to her senses. She pouted and said, No need. I can do it. She was not lying. In fact, Lan Xian was quite smart. Although her grades were not as good as Shishi's, she was still in the top 10 of the class. She could do most of the questions in the summer homework. However, this little girl had procrastination, which made her mother cough, anxious again and again. But now that Shishi was watching her do her homework, Lan Xian's efficiency increased again. Yang Yi did not need to accompany her. After watching for a while, he handed the work over to Shishi and went to the kitchen to cook delicious food for Lan Xian. Now it seemed that Shishi's role was very obvious. Okay. Shishi saw that Lan Xian was working hard again, so she sat back upright. She looked at the book in her hand for a while, then turned to look at Lan Xian for a while and muttered, There's not much homework. We can eat after we finish it. At this time, Tong Tong walked by with a stuffed teddy bear. He looked at his sisters curiously but did not stop. He walked through the side hall to the dining room. There was a box on the table in the dining room. It was exactly the same as the one in Lan Xian's house. It was worth mentioning that Tong Tong went home with his sisters and parents. He did not know that his sister Lan Xian had finished the box of cake. When he got into the car, he realized that there was another one in the car and was relieved. As for now, Lil Bian wasn't hungry either. Like a king inspecting his own territory, he wobbled over to take a look, then giggled and turned back in satisfaction. But when they returned to the side hall again, little Momo was directly caught by her mother. Mo Fei carried little Momo and ran back to the living room like a robber. She had just sat on the sofa and chatted with Wu Jingjing. Now she carried little Momo back to the sofa and said to Wu Jingjing with a smile, "He always likes to play with sisters, but not now. We can't let him disturb sister's homework." This was too much of an injustice to little Swan. Unfortunately, Tong Tong did not know how to redress his grievances. Mo Fei and Wu Jingjing were originally talking about some shopping, but now that little Momo was there, they began to play with the little guy excitedly. "Mommy, what's this called?" Wu Jingjing pointed at Tong Tong's teddy bear and asked with a smile. Tong Tong looked down and pointed at the teddy bear. He pouted and said, "It's a dog." Wu Jingjing was dumbfounded. "What?" Murphy was convulsing with laughter. She patted the sofa and said to Wu Jingjing, "I forgot to tell you. He can't differentiate between long-haired animals. It's either a dog or a cat." Tong Tong looked at his mother in confusion. He did not know why his mother was laughing so hard. However, he felt that his mother was wrong. He quickly held the teddy bear and turned around. He waved his other hand and said to his mother, "Oh, it's a cat. It's not a dog." Murphy and Wu Jingjing were laughing. They did not notice that Tong Tong was pointing at the teddy bear's dark brown nose and trying to correct his mother's judgment. "It's a dog." Wu Jingjing shook her head with a smile and said, "Mommy, it's a bear. Tell me it's a baby bear." Tong Tong turned his head and looked at Wu Jingjing in confusion. After a while, he turned his head and pointed at the teddy bear firmly. He pouted slightly and muttered softly, "It's a dog. It's obviously a dog. Our steamed bun also has a black and soft nose like this. Kitty's nose is not as pretty. It's very small and some are even pink." Ding Xiang went back to work on Monday. Guozi stayed at home for 2 more days before he prepared to go back to Guangdong to help Ding Xiang. Before he left, Tan Huizhen, like most mothers in the world, prepared a lot of food and necessities for Guozi. It was a big box full of food and necessities. "Mom, I can't bring so much." Guozi did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Why can't you bring it? You can go to the airport to check in later. Don't you have a car to pick you up when you arrive in Guangdong?" Tan Huizhen refuted. "I can't eat that much. It's not like I'm going to be away for half a year. I'll be back once every 1 or 2 weeks. Do I need to bring so much? Also, you can buy ham, dried fish, and potato powder wherever you go. Don't underestimate Guangdong's market." Guozi said helplessly, "I didn't say that you have to bring all of it. I'm afraid that you can't get used to Guangdong's food. You can ask Ding Xiang to cook some of it for you. When she came to our house before, I asked the nanny to teach her how to cook Jiangnan's local dishes. As for the other part, you can share it with your colleagues and the villagers. Your dad and I have been to the countryside before. We know that these villagers are actually very simple people. If you are good to them, they will be good to you." Tan Huizhen nagged as she packed the food. "The local food in Guangdong is also very delicious. There's nothing I can't get used to." Guozi whispered a few words. "What?" Tan Huizhen raised her head. Guozi quickly shook his head. "No, nothing." Tan Huizhen asked suspiciously, "How do you eat in the countryside of Guangdong? You said that Ding Xiang would cook for you. Is that a lie? Is she too busy?" Guozi quickly explained, "No, Sister Ding Xiang is a little busy, but don't I help her with something? Mom, don't underestimate me. With me helping her, she is much more relaxed. Then we usually eat at our hometown's house, or Sister Ding Xiang cooks. A few of us eat together. Everyone says that Sister Ding Xiang cooks delicious food." The last sentence, needless to say, was added by Guozi in a hurry because he felt that he was going to be exposed. Tan Huizhen didn't make any more comments on this. She just got up and went to the room to take out a new set of skincare products. There were facial masks, skincare creams, sunscreen, and so on. They were all packed in a box. "Take this to Ding Xiang. The weather in Guangdong is probably very hot. When I saw her this time, she was even more tan than before. Women should know how to take care of themselves. No matter how busy they are, they should pay attention to taking care of themselves. Tan Huijian didn't even raise her head, and directly put the box into Guozi's suitcase. Guozi wasn't stupid. At this time he also felt that something was wrong. His hair stood on end, and his heart was in a mess. He didn't know what to do. But Tan Huijian didn't say anything, and he didn't dare to ask. After all, if he asked directly, it would be self-destructing. Guozi could only be nervous, and his mouth was dry. He could only answer carefully, "Mm." But until Guozi got on the plane, he couldn't find any clues on his mother's face. What is going on? Why did she suddenly send skincare products to Sister Ding Xiang? Sitting on the plane, Guozi couldn't even read the script in his hand. He frowned and thought about it himself. Could it be that something had really gone wrong? Was that why Sister Ding Xiang had been called back? But Guozi felt that it shouldn't be, because when Ding Xiang came to the house, Guo Zhengyan acted very normal, and it didn't seem like he was communicating with his son and his son's girlfriend. Chapter 1173. My mom might have found out about us. When Guozi passed the set of skincare products that his mom had gifted to Ding Xiang, he smiled helplessly and told Ding Xiang about it. Ding Xiang, who was already embarrassed when she found out that Guozi had given her skincare products, was so shocked that she almost dropped the box. Luckily, Guozi quickly grabbed her hand and helped her carry it. Because Guozi and Ding Xiang's relationship hadn't been made public, they didn't live together in the countryside. Ding Xiang and a girl stayed in the same room in the town hostel, and Guozi didn't allow others to give him special treatment. He stayed with a volunteer college student. However, during the day, most of the team went to their respective villages in batches for training, and Ding Xiang didn't go with them because she had to report to the leaders of the town. Therefore, Guozi could ask Ding Xiang to talk to him in his room. Guozi pulled Ding Xiang, who was still in shock, to sit on his bed. Ding Xiang couldn't help but ask, "How did your mom find out about us all of a sudden? Could it be that she accidentally found out something when I went back this time?" Guozi shook his head gently and said with a bitter smile, "I don't know how or when she found out, but I just called Yin Yan and she told me that you came over last weekend. When you first came to my house, it seemed like my mom was deliberately observing us. I don't know if she already knew about our situation, but she wasn't sure. But she wasn't completely sure. Just like how I'm giving you this skincare product now, I'm not completely sure if my mother is doing this for a deeper reason." Although Ding Xiang was in charge of such a big project and could manage it well, Ding Xiang was really at a loss when faced with such a situation. She grabbed Guozi's hand and asked in a low voice, Then what should we do? Should we confess to your mom directly?" Seeing Ding Xiang so helpless, Guozi's heroic spirit rose in his heart. He gently patted Ding Xiang's hand and said in an imposing manner, "You don't have to confess for the time being. Leave this matter to me." "How are you going to deal with it?" Ding Xiang asked, puzzled. Guozi smiled and said, "Think about it. If my mother really found out about us, why didn't she say it directly? Could it be that she hasn't discovered it yet?" Ding Xiang asked softly. "No, he must have discovered it. But I think she doesn't want to cause trouble for us. Maybe it's because my dad still has some obstacles, but my mom definitely likes you. Otherwise, she wouldn't have given you this set of skincare products and told me to tell you to take good care of it." Guozi excitedly analyzed. "That's why my mother likes you as her daughter-in-law. You're virtuous and hardworking. She even helped you hide it." Guozi didn't know that there was a subtle misunderstanding in his judgment. But Guozi now felt that he should take out the responsibility that a man should have. So he boldly said to Ding Xiang, "Let's maintain this tacit understanding with my mom for now. Wait for me for a while. I must act well in the new movie that Brother Yang gave me. I think this movie is very challenging, and I want to act it well. Brother Yang also said that if I act well, I might even become the best actor. At that time, even my dad will have a whole new level of respect for me. Then, I can openly bring you home and say that you're my wife." Although she was long past the age of believing in fairy tales, Ding Xiang's heart was still swayed by Guizi's bold words. She looked at Guizi with some admiration. After a while, she blushed and pursed her lips, saying softly, "Then every night, I'll accompany you to the grain sunning field to read the script and practice with you." Ignoring Guizi and Ding Xiang for the time being, it was already August. Lan Xian, who had finished her summer homework, didn't have time to practice diligently. She had to go to the swimming competition with Xixi. Early in the morning, everyone was packing up and getting ready to leave. Tong Tong saw his mother fold his sister's swimsuit and put it into the bag. He blinked and hurriedly ran out. Coincidentally, Yang Yi also came upstairs and met the little guy in the corridor. "Papa, Papa." Tong Tong excitedly grabbed his father's finger and pointed outside with his other hand. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know how to express himself. So he mumbled something in an alien language. "Nana, Nana. What do you want to take?" Yang Yi asked with a smile, thinking that Tong Tong was talking about the word take. Tong Tong was a little discouraged. He had no choice but to pull his father downstairs. "Slow down, don't rush." Yang Yi had no choice but to follow his restless son up the stairs, step by step, to see where he was going. Tong Tong took his father's hand and walked out of the house through the back door. They came to the swimming pool and pointed at the swimming ring that Yang Yi folded under the awning. He said in a childish voice, "Nana, that. What do you want to do?" Yang Yi asked in confusion. Why couldn't his father understand what he was trying to say? However, little Momo was used to it. He pouted his little mouth and went forward by himself. His little hand pulled open the floating board and took out his small swimming ring that had not been pumped up yet. He held it in his right hand and held his father's hand with his left. Yang Yi thought of something and said with a smile, "Why are you bringing this swimming ring? We're not going to swim today. We're going to watch your sister's competition. You can't bring this with you." Tong Tong raised his head and looked at him in confusion. His big, innocent eyes were filled with anticipation that he wanted to swim with his sister. Yang Yi had no choice but to coax her for a while. After much persuasion, little rascal finally put the swimming ring back. Lan Xian was going to participate in the competition, so Lan Haokai and Wu Jingjing had to accompany her. However, Lan Xian wanted to sit in the same car as Xixi. She refused to take her family's car. Therefore, Lan Haokai had no choice but to get someone to drive the company's minibus. Yang Yi didn't need to drive himself. Everyone sat in the minibus to the competition. This was good. Everyone sat together and talked and laughed along the way. "Xixi, the competition is going to start. Are you scared?" Lan Haokai teased Xixi with a smile. "I'm not scared. I've participated in so many competitions." Xixi sat beside Lan Xian. Perhaps it was because the seat belt was a little uncomfortable, but her little butt was twisting around on the chair. She giggled and said, "I've even won an award before. Because I'm a good dancer." "But we're not going to a dancing competition this time." Lan Haokai laughed and said, "It's a swimming competition. Many people are participating. Some of the boys have learned how to swim, so they can swim very fast." Xixi was a little hesitant. She blinked her big bright eyes and said hesitantly, Then I don't know. It's okay." Lan Xian sat aside and said indifferently, "What's there to be scared of? That's because you're not ambitious. You just want to have fun, unlike Xixi. Xixi is so ambitious. If you want to win, you have to pursue it." Wu Jingjing was like many mothers, using other people's children as examples. Fortunately, Lan Xian was already used to it. She pursed her lips and didn't answer her mother's words. She just continued to flirt with Xixi. However, Xixi was more serious. She hugged Lan Xian's arm and rubbed her head against it. Her eyes were curved into crescents, and she was as bright and adorable as a rainbow after the rain. She explained, I'm not either. My papa also said that we don't want to win everything. We just need to work hard." Chapter 1174. When they arrived at the swimming pool, the scene was not as crowded as Yang Yi had imagined. However, this wasn't something surprising. After all, this was just a swimming competition held by the city. Even if it was labeled as a national competition, only some young parents were willing to sign their children up for this kind of small competition. The onlookers were also their family members. No outsider would be so free as to come and watch a group of children compete in a competition. However, the children participating in the competition, as well as the parents and grandparents who had accompanied them here, were all chatting noisily in the not-so-large swimming pool, especially in the waiting area and the audience seats. It still gave off a lively feeling. She was a little nervous when she saw so many people. She followed closely beside her father, and let her father hold her little hand. Then she carefully looked around, just like Tong Tong, who was sitting in her father's arms, looking around curiously. Interestingly, because they had refused any preferential treatment, they also had to line up to sign in like the other parents and children. The person in charge of signing in was a female staff member, and a few student volunteers from the Sports Institute. They did not realize that the fat uncle standing in front of them was the sponsor of this event. They still said formally, "The contestants sign here." They also have to write down the name and contact information of their family members. Lan Hao Kai quickly waved his hand and gave his position to Yang Yi. Yang Yi hugged Tong Tong, smiled at Shi and asked, "They need your signature. Why don't you sign it? Do you still remember how to write my name and phone number?" Yang Yi had asked Shi to memorize these as early as when she was 4 years old. Of course, for a little girl with a super good memory, this was not a difficult request. Cici was eager to give it a try, but she was too embarrassed to shout in front of outsiders, so she softly replied, "Hee, I'll remember." Shi was very happy to be able to show off in front of her father. This could be seen from the happy smile on her little face when she wrote down her name. "Wow, you're pretty good. You can even write your own name. It's so complicated." The female staff member in charge of signing in had a good personality. After watching for a while, she smiled and praised Shi, who was writing her name, and asked, "Which grade are you in?" Cici's face blushed as she listened. She quickly finished writing her father's phone number. Then, she took her father's hand and shyly hid behind his arm, revealing half of her face. She bit her lower lip and smiled with some pride and embarrassment. I'm in the 1st grade." "No, we've already finished the 1st grade. We'll be in the 2nd grade from now on." When Lan Xian heard this, she felt that Shi's answer was not correct. How could she study in the 1st grade again? She shouted anxiously. "Oh right." She suddenly realized that she had said something wrong. The little girl felt even more embarrassed. She took her father's hand and shook her little, but unconsciously because of her anxiousness and self-blame. She explained in a low voice, "Then I'm in the 2nd grade, and Xian is also in the 2nd grade." "That's already very good. Your handwriting is very good." The female staff member was still praising her. She did not intend to continue nagging. She handed some identification cards, a simple bath bag, and a schematic diagram of the venue to Yang Yi and Lan Hao Kai, and briefly introduced the process of the competition. Then she pointed to the locker room and said, "The children can go and change first. Only one parent is allowed to accompany the child in the stadium. The other parents and children will have to work hard and watch the competition in the stands." There were still children who needed to sign in, so Yang Yi and the others nodded and walked in the direction of the locker room. There were fewer people in the passage to the locker room, and there were fewer peeking eyes. After all, Murphy was so beautiful. Even though she was wearing sunglasses and a hat, her beautiful face, tall, and graceful figure was still somewhat conspicuous among the many parents. She was the same. The little girl was already very beautiful. With her long hair behind her back, she gave people the feeling that she was a cultured little lady from a water town in the south of the Yangtze River. Naturally, she was more eye-catching. Now that there were fewer people around, she also became lively. She took her father's hand and wanted to run to the front. Hurry up, let's go change and swim. It won't be so soon." You've been placed in the 31st group, and Xian has been placed in the 33rd group. You still have to wait for more than 30 groups before it's your turn to compete." Wu Jingjing took out her phone and looked at it, then said with a smile. Shi turned her head and looked at Xian's mother with some confusion. She asked doubtfully, Do we have to wait for a long time? Yes, think about it. You have to count from 1 to 31. Won't it take a long time? Wu Jingjing said with a smile. It won't take that long. The competition here is divided into several venues. You see, there are a total of 4 swimming pools. You can take turns to compete, so it won't take too long. Lan Caocai said as he waved the schematic diagram of the venues he had just received. There's such a thing? Wu Jingjing leaned over to take a look in surprise. Xixi looked at the 2 adults in confusion, then turned her head to look at her father. It's okay. You can change into your swimsuit with your mother first. Isn't there a pool for warming up? Let's swim in the pool first and get the feeling. No matter when the competition is, we won't be afraid, Yang Yi said as he rubbed the little girl's head with a smile. Murphy took Xixi, Wu Jingjing and Lan Xian to change their swimsuits, but the ones who accompanied the 2 children to the competition venue were indeed Yang Yi and Lan Caocai. Murphy and Wu Jingjing stayed in the stands with Tong Tong. Leaving Tong Tong and her mother aside, Lan Caocai and Lan Xian walked in front. Yang Yi carried a handbag with Xixi's clothes, water bottle, and other things in his right hand, and held Xixi's hand with his left hand. They followed them to the pool for warming up. Xixi changed into a one-piece swimsuit that looked like a skirt. The part that was close to her legs was a layer of pleated skirt. It wasn't competitive, but it was very protective. Xixi wore it just like a skirt. Of course, Xixi also liked this style. She felt that this swimsuit looked especially good in her eyes. Compared to other swimsuits with single colors or simple prints, this swimsuit had layers of blue, white, and red colors that were irregularly arranged. It gave people a fresh and bright feeling. Naturally, it also had a bit of a fashionable taste. However, no matter how much it looked like a skirt, it was still a swimsuit. The hem was very short, and the advantage of the little girl's long legs could no longer be hidden. With her slender and long calves exposed, it gave people a feeling that she was taller. Fortunately, when they came out of the changing room, the 2 mothers wrapped a layer of bath towels around Xixi and Lan Xian. It just covered their shoulders and thighs. On one hand, it was to prevent the 2 girls from being exposed. On the other hand, they were also worried that they would catch a cold. After all, the indoor swimming pool was not as hot as outside. On the contrary, after blocking the sun, there was a cool feeling inside. At this time, the little girl grabbed the bath towel around her collar and carefully stepped on her slippers to follow her father's footsteps. Girls at this age were not as reckless as boys. They still knew how to be shy. It was the first time that they appeared in such a big event in a swimsuit. Xixi also felt that there would be a lot of people looking at her. The little girl's face turned red. She lowered her head and hid behind her father. Chapter 1175. The game had already begun. From time to time, the referee's voice could be heard from the 4 large swimming pools in the inner court, as well as the excited cheers of the parents in the stands. Yang Yi listened carefully to the requirements announced on the radio. Currently, only the small athletes from the 7th to the 10th group were notified to go to the registration office. It's not your turn yet, Yang Yi said to Xixi and Lan Xian with a smile. Do you want to go into the water to warm up? Stepping on the wet floor, surrounded by people, some people looked at Xixi curiously from time to time. The little girl was feeling a little reserved. Now that she heard her father say that she could play in the warm-up pool with many children, she felt as if she had been granted amnesty. She quickly nodded. Okay. When will it be our turn? Lan Xian and Xixi raised their heads and looked at Father Yang with their fish eyes, while wearing swimming goggles. It'll be a while. When it's time, there will be a notice and your names will be announced. Yang Yi smiled and pointed to the loudspeaker above. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye out for you. Xixi didn't forget to care about her friends at this time. She came over, pulled Lan Xian's arm, and said enthusiastically, Xianair, just now your mom said that we are in the 31st and 33rd groups. It's only the 10th group now. It's not our turn yet. Yang Yi gave Xixi a bath towel. She couldn't wait and jumped into the pool with a splash. The little girl who entered the water was like a mermaid who had been released. She happily splashed the water and played happily. Lan Xian, who was still slowly adjusting her goggles, was splashed by Shishi. She shouted anxiously, "Oh Shishi, wait for me. Let's play together." Hee hee, don't worry, the water isn't deep. It's just a little bit. Shishi stood up and gestured at her belly. The water level was about here. Then she lay down again and smiled at Lon Xian. The swimming pool used for warm-up was not deep, but the two girls still played in the water excitedly. Anyway, it was more comfortable to play in the water in this hot summer. Seeing this, Lance Haokai couldn't help but remind the two girls, "Don't swim too hard. What if you run out of energy during the competition?" Yang Yi glanced at the two girls, then turned to look for Murphy and the others. Yang Yi's eyes were still very sharp. He quickly found Murphy sitting in the crowd in the direction of the pool. Although Murphy was wearing sunglasses and a hat, her temperament was too unique. Yang Yi recognized her at a glance. He smiled, took out his phone, and called them. "You don't need to tell me your location. I see you." Yang Yi laughed. Murphy's mischievous laughter came from the phone. "I also see that you see us, because I can see you all the time." Yang Yi was a little surprised. You can see me? I just saw that you were still lowering your head." That was only after I was discovered by you. I'm also very observant and alert," Mo Fei said proudly. After showing off, she became serious and explained to Yang Yi, "Actually, it's Hua Hua. He wanted to play with his sister, and they got into a fight. I'm still comforting him now. Hua Hua, don't move." Yang Yi heard some noise from Murphy's side. It turned out that when the phone rang, Tong Tong stopped for a while. He looked up and opened his mouth to watch his mother answer the phone. But now that he heard his mother scolding him, he pouted unwillingly. He even wanted to reach for the phone. "Ooh, I want my sister." The little guy's unwilling cry came from the phone. Fortunately, Wu Jingjing helped carry Tong Tong over and said to him, Look who's over there." With Tong Tong's attention attracted, Murphy had a chance to continue talking to Yang Yi. She was so angry that she couldn't help but laugh. "Hey, look at your son. He's getting more and more active and naughty. He doesn't even want to sit with his mother for a while, and he wants to play with his sister." Yang Yi said softly, "It's my fault. I forgot to give him one of Hua Hua's toys. He must be bored sitting alone in the stands. I didn't see him sticking to my sister like this when she went to school." Murphy complained to Yang Yi. But suddenly, her voice became lighter. There's a new situation. I'll tell you later." Murphy hung up the phone excitedly, leaving a confused Yang Yi behind. Yang Yi didn't know that after Wu Jingjing carried Tong Tong over, Tong Tong did look curiously in the direction she pointed. But since he was so far away and didn't know how to differentiate by clothes, he naturally couldn't recognize his father. But at this moment, Tong Tong's ears seemed to have heard something. He turned his head and unknowingly, his attention was attracted again. In the direction Tong Tong was looking, there was a chubby little girl. She looked a little younger than Tong Tong, probably a little over a year old. She was wearing a red dress with white dots and a bow on it. She was being carried in her mother's arms. However, compared to Tong Tong, who was already strong enough to run around, this little girl was much more adorable. Her mother smiled as she pointed at her, and taught her how to speak. "Brother Tsong Tsong, little sister Fei Fei." However, this little girl still stared blankly at her mother's face. Even though her mother had changed to a simpler brother and sister, she still had no interest in following suit. Instead, for some reason, she grinned happily and her little hand softly reached out to touch her mother's face. Brother Tsong Tsong was probably a 5-year-old boy sitting next to them. He ignored his little sister and ate a lollipop while watching the competition in the swimming pool excitedly. Tong Tong stared at the little girl in a daze. He even forgot why he almost started crying. Wu Jingjing naturally noticed this and held back her laughter. When Murphy put down the phone, she leaned over and whispered to Murphy, "Look at your son. He has such good taste. He's not looking for an older sister, but now he's interested in someone else's little sister." Murphy also couldn't help but laugh, but she didn't dare to speak. She raised her hand and made a gesture to Wu Jingjing, indicating that she shouldn't disturb Tong Tong. It was good that they could quiet down. Otherwise, it would be quite embarrassing if they started crying in public. However, Tong Tong still felt a little movement. He turned his head curiously and looked at his mother. The little guy was happy to share his discovery with his mother. He pointed at the little girl and gestured for his mother to look. Then he said in a childish voice, "Big sister." "She's not a big sister. She should be a little sister. You're older than her." Murphy didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Not a big sister? Tong Tong blinked and was a little confused. He couldn't understand why it wasn't a big sister. Weren't they all girls? Girls were all big sisters. Forget it. Little Mommy saw that the little sister was holding a milk bottle and drinking milk, and felt that it was quite interesting, so he ignored his mother. In any case, he had already introduced her to his mother. He continued to watch with great interest. On Yang Yi's side, he called Cece and Lan Xian out of the pool. Although it wasn't their turn yet, the two girls had already been playing in the water for more than 10 minutes. It was time for them to come out and take a break to rehydrate themselves. They would be going for the competition soon. "I haven't had enough fun yet," she said to her father. She still hadn't had enough. "They didn't ask me to swim. They just wanted to play in the water." Yang Yi smiled and put the bath towels on the two girls. He also took out a towel from his bag to wipe Shishi's wet little face. Lan Xian still had her father to take care of her. He said, "You still want to play? Did you forget why we came here today?" Shishi wrapped herself in the bath towel and naughtily snuggled into her father's arms. Then she hugged her father's waist and giggled. "I know, we have a competition." Lan Xian took a sip from the water bottle her father handed over. She realized it was just plain water and said with disappointment, "Oh, this water doesn't taste good. Dad, I want to eat ice cream." "Where can I get ice cream for you now?" Lan Zhoukai looked around and said helplessly. She was really a child. How could she jump to ice cream? Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "After the competition, we'll go back and eat ice cream in the car. Uncle will buy ice cream for each of you." She also liked ice cream. Her eyes lit up and she said happily, Then I want to eat taro-flavored ice cream. It's super delicious." No, it's just that the taro-flavored ice cream isn't good enough. I want to add chocolate crispy skin." Lan Xian said proudly. Well, the two girls were so excited that they forgot to keep their voices down. The children who had just come out of the water swallowed hard. They all looked at their parents. The parents were going to have a headache. Chapter 1176. Don't think that Yang Yi was already a has-been star. No one could recognize him even if he stood in the swimming pool without any disguise. In fact, he had only stood by the pool for a short while, but because of his and Lan Zhoukai's extraordinary temperament, they had already attracted a lot of attention. Among them, some of the young parents couldn't help but look at Yang Yi, and then revealed a look of surprise. Obviously, they also recognized the tall man's identity. They stared at Yang Yi for a long time and Yang Yi noticed it. From the corner of his eye, he saw that some of them were frantically searching for further confirmation with their phones, and some secretly took 2 photos of Yang Yi. Yang Yi didn't care too much. After all, as a star, he had long been used to being secretly photographed. He was calm in front of the camera, as if he didn't notice at all. Of course, he didn't care about being secretly photographed, but for Shishi and Lan Xian, Yang Yi was still more careful. As soon as they came out of the pool, Yang Yi took a bath towel and put it on them. In addition, he also didn't leave a trace of other people's cameras with his body, but on the surface, he was still talking and laughing with the little ones, so they didn't notice anything unusual. But other people also had acting skills. Yang Yi and the others sat on the bench for a while. When the announcement on the radio came to Group 24, a mother with a shy blush on her cheeks and her son who looked to be around 8 years old seemed to inadvertently pass by Yang Yi and the others. Then, "Hey, aren't you Yang Yi?" She seemed to have just discovered him, and reached out to cover her mouth, and exclaimed in surprise. Yang Yi smiled helplessly in his heart. He had a photographic memory, so of course he could recognize that she was one of the young mothers who was secretly looking at him. But after all, she was his fan. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment, and decided not to tell her so that she wouldn't be embarrassed. Yang Yi smiled gently, and told her not to say anything. Yes, yes, I won't tell anyone. The young mother nodded excitedly and said in a low voice, Oh Yang, I'm so lucky to see you. I'm so happy. Did you bring Shishi to the competition too? Aya, I'm so excited. I finally got to see you in person. Can I take a picture with you? She was indeed excited. Even though she had lowered her voice, she was so excited that she was incoherent. She looked at her son, a little boy who already had his own independent thoughts. He was looking at his mother in surprise, as if he couldn't recognize her. Shishi was watching curiously when Lan Xian tugged at her arm and pulled her to the side. She whispered, Wow Shishi, look at how fast this person talks. Yeah. Shishi turned around and whispered to her friend, I don't even know what my papa will say. Yang Yi didn't say much, but agreed to take a picture with the other party. Lan Zhoukai took a picture of them. Of course, Yang Yi's hand was very close to his body. He only slightly bent his waist to avoid giving the fans a strong sense of oppression, because of his tall figure. Lan Xian watched them take pictures and couldn't help but pout. She whispered to Shishi, I don't like this person. Why is she pestering your father? My mother doesn't let other women pester my father. Shishi hadn't encountered the situation that Lan Xian was talking about. She blinked her big eyes in confusion and asked in confusion, But she's my papa's fan. She's taking pictures with my papa. Lan Xian imitated her mother's tone and said unhappily, If it were me, I would definitely drive all these bad women away. Shishi was amused by Lan Xian. She smiled with curved eyes. Looking at Lan Xian's jealous look, she giggled. Of course, the two of them were whispering to each other, and no one else could hear them. On Yang Yi's side, the fan asked Murphy for more, and then said that she was Yang Yi's fan and Murphy's fan. Finally, she asked, Yang Yi, can I make one last small request? I want to take a picture with Shishi. As she said this, she pulled her son in front of her. Obviously, she wanted to take a picture with her son. She was counting her chickens before they hatched. Yang Yi shook his head and refused without thinking, but his tone was still gentle. Forget about taking a picture with Shishi. She's still young. I hope to leave her some privacy. After sending off the fan, it didn't take long for Shishi and the others to start the recording. Yang Yi and Lan Zhoukai took the two girls to the recording office. At the recording office, a middle-aged official with glasses was reading the names. Group 31 the first line, XXX the second line, the fourth line, Yang Shi. Here. Yang Yi quickly raised his hand and shouted, like the other parents. She heard someone call her name. She was stunned for a moment. When she saw her father's action, she realized that someone was really calling her. The little girl held her father's hand, raised her little head in confusion, and whispered, Papa, they're calling me. It's okay. It's just like when you have classes in school and the teacher calls the roll to see if you've arrived. Yang Yi smiled and said to Shishi, Papa has already responded for you. However, this explanation made Shishi even more confused. She was not a college student. Why would the teacher call the roll in class? The little girl tilted her little head and thought for a while. When she saw that the person who called her name just now went to call someone else's name, she pouted her little mouth and stopped thinking. Interestingly, although there were 6 swimming tracks, Shishi's group 31 only had 5 children. The child from the 5th line didn't come. She didn't know if the child was delayed by something at home, or if the child was too scared to come. Because this competition was divided into groups according to age and gender, Shishi also saw the other 4 little girls in the same group when she received the number tag. However, in comparison, Shishi was taller than them. The little girls' long legs made the other 4 little girls and their parents feel as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Shishi didn't feel that she was in a competition. She was talking to her father in a relaxed mood. When she saw the other 4 little friends, although she was a little embarrassed, she still smiled at them in a friendly manner. Shishi threw out an olive branch, but no one was willing to accept it. Others felt that Shishi was a strong opponent and more or less glanced at Shishi with some hostility. When they saw Shishi looking at them, those parents turned their heads away. Under the influence of such an atmosphere, those little girls didn't want to make eye contact with Shishi. Suddenly, She felt the cruelty of reality. Not everyone was willing to be friends with her in harmony and harmony. Cece's heart was like a pure mirror. She could reflect the good and bad of others on it. Now she could feel a trace of hostility and jealousy from these little girls and their parents, which made her feel uncomfortable. Why were they so fierce? She felt that her good intentions were being trampled on. She couldn't accept it and pouted her little mouth, feeling wronged. When her father squatted down to stick the number tag on her body, she opened her thin and cold arms and hugged her father's neck sadly. Chapter 1177. How could Yang Yi not notice the change in Shishi's mood? When the little girl hugged his neck, Yang Yi noticed it. He comforted her softly as he put the number sticker on the little girl's shoulder, and asked her in a low voice. After understanding the reason why Shishi felt wronged, Yang Yi couldn't help but feel a little helpless. After all, this world was still very realistic. Before there was competition, everyone could be very friendly, but when there was a conflict of interests, the selfish side of human nature would be revealed. Perhaps those parents and children didn't mean to be jealous, but when they saw Shishi's obvious height advantage, it was as if the whole class of ordinary girls had suddenly been mixed in with a great beauty from the Beijing Film Academy. They subconsciously isolated Shishi. Actually, it was very normal, wasn't it? After all, those children had been carefully nurtured by their parents and arranged to go to various interest classes since they were young. In fact, they had been instilled with the idea of competitiveness since they were young. Naturally, they couldn't tolerate others being better than them. It was just that Cece was relatively naive and more sensitive to these feelings of undisguised malice. A little bit of hostility and resistance from others seemed to be somewhat magnified in her small heart. This was something she had rarely encountered before. However, Yang Yi didn't intend to tear the cruelty of reality to Shishi too early. He also didn't want her to understand the origin of other people's hostility. He didn't want her to deny these children and establish a mentality of hatred. Therefore, Yang Yi gently pressed Shishi's shoulder. After putting the number sticker on, he stroked the little girl's head and whispered in her ear, "Actually, they don't hate you. Sometimes we can't be too extreme when looking at things. Think about it, you're so cute. Why would so many children hate you at the same time? Right?" Shishi was stunned for a moment. She propped herself up and leaned her back against her father's arm. She blinked her big eyes and looked at her father's smiling face. She muttered hesitantly, "Yes, a lot of people like me. Everyone says I'm cute." Yang Yi smiled and said, "That's right. The real reason why they ignored your smile is because the competition is about to start. They are all nervous, just like how you were especially nervous when you were performing on stage in kindergarten. Your face was tight and you didn't dare to smile at your parents. It's the same reason." "So they are the ones who are nervous?" Shishi was suddenly enlightened. Instantly, the little girl's gloomy mood was swept away, and she revealed a sweet smile. Then they don't have to be nervous. I'm not nervous anymore." In the end, Shishi still believed her father's words. Moreover, when she recalled how nervous she was in the past, she also forgave those children. At least, she wasn't as unhappy and brooding as before. "That's because you've participated in many performances, competitions, and seen many big scenes." Yang Yi smiled and scratched the little girl's nose. He said, "It's reasonable for them to be nervous, and it's also reasonable for you not to be nervous." Shishi twisted in her father's arms, and she was in a good mood. She pursed her small mouth and smiled. Hee. Then, should I tell them not to be nervous? Because this is a competition, and they can win prizes by participating in the competition." "That won't do." Yang Yi quickly stopped Shishi's overly kind thoughts and explained, "They will adjust themselves. Sometimes, for some children, an appropriate amount of nervousness can help them perform better." "Okay." The little girl was still a little disappointed. Although Yang Yi's words were a little bit of a white lie, the effect was still good. Shishi forgot the unhappiness just now. When Lan Xian came back from checking the records, she happily greeted her. She puffed out her small chest, pointed to her right shoulder and said, "Xian, look, I have a number here." "I have one too, I'm number 2. Look." Lan Xian smiled and took her number from her father's hand and showed it to Shi. Hey, yours is blue, mine is red, Shi said in surprise as if she had discovered a new continent. Is it? Lan Xian looked carefully, scratched her head and said puzzledly. Right, why are our colors different? Lan Zhoukai laughed, patted the heads of the two little girls and said, of course it's different. You two are competing in different groups. Do you see the flags next to the pool over there? Shi, your flag is red. Later, you will compete in the pool over there, and Xian Air, you will compete in the pool with the blue flag. Shi suddenly understood. She felt that this was something new, and she thought, wait, Dad might not know. The little girl ran back and excitedly reported her new knowledge to her dad. Papa, let me tell you. In the stands, Murphy and Wu Jingjing had already sat down. They sat together with the mother of the little girl named Fei Fei, chatting and laughing. Of course, it was mainly Wu Jingjing who was chatting with the mother. Murphy's character was still a little cold. She could chat happily with acquaintances, but she was not very enthusiastic when chatting with strangers. Therefore, after answering 2 questions with a smile, she focused on the interaction between Tong Tong and the little girl named Fei Fei. Fei Fei had a toy rattledrum, but she did not know how to play with it. Sometimes she could not even hold it, and it would slip on her clothes. Now this toy was in Tong Tong's hands. Fei Fei's mother saw that Tong Tong liked it very much, so she smiled and asked her daughter to play with it for Tong Tong. Tong Tong understood it after watching others demonstrate it once. He waved his little hands, and the rattledrum kept making lili-pala sounds. Hua hua, be careful when you play with it. Don't hold it too close to your eyes, and don't hold it too close to Fei Fei. Murphy smiled and pulled Tong Tong's hand, asking him to keep a safe distance. Tong Tong did not mind and continued playing with the rattledrum. The sound made by the rattledrum was very interesting, and the little guy was very engrossed in it. He even stared at the swinging hammer without blinking. When Fei Fei saw this little brother playing so happily, she could not help but stretch out her little hand and squeak, wanting to take it back. Wu Jingjing, who was holding Tong Tong, lowered her head and said, Hua hua, give the rattledrum back to your little sister. Tong Tong stopped what he was doing, but he looked at Mother Wu blankly, as if he did not understand the situation. Fei Fei's mother thought that Tong Tong was reluctant to let go, so she smiled and said, It's okay, let him play. How can you do that? Hua hua, this is his little sister's toy. Wu Jingjing tried to persuade him. However, Tong Tong only lowered his head and looked at the rattledrum in his hands. He even touched it with his left hand, as if he was doing some research. Murphy thought of something and came up with an idea. She leaned over and pointed at the rattledrum with a smile. Hua hua, return this little drum to your little sister, and let her play with it. Little sister? This time, Tong Tong reacted. He raised his head and looked at his mother's finger movements, then at Fei Fei. The little guy suddenly giggled. He generously stretched out his little arm and stuffed the rattledrum into Fei Fei's little sister's arms. Here. Then he withdrew his little hand and looked at Fei Fei expectantly, as if he was waiting to see her performance. When Murphy and Wu Jingjing saw this scene, they could not help but be amused. They shook their heads and laughed. It was also Wu Jingjing who explained to little sister Fei Fei's mother that she came to a sudden realization. While smiling, she grabbed her daughter's little hand and played with her with the rattledrum. At the same time, she teased her with a smile and said, Fei Fei, you've become an elder sister. Little sister, haha. At this moment, the broadcast in the field sounded. The next competition is the 31st competition of the 7 to 8-year-old girls group. The competition venue is the red zone swimming pool. The first path, the fourth path, Yangshi, please lead our little athletes out. It's Big Sister's turn. Although Murphy was watching Tong Tong, she kept her ears open. When she heard Shishi's name, she turned her head and immediately recognized her daughter from the crowd. She quickly pulled Tong Tong's little hand and pointed at the red pool with a smile. Hua hua, look, Big Sister is on the stage. This time, Big Sister was the real Big Sister. Little Wanwan, do you still remember your own sister? Wanwan, do you still remember your sister? Chapter 1178. Sister? Tong Tong looked at his mother, and then at his little sister. In the end, his mother asked him to look again, and he looked in the direction his mother pointed at. Since they were already in the stands above the competition venue, Tong Tong recognized his father immediately. Wasn't that tall and cool adult in shorts his father? Papa. Tong Tong's reaction was similar to his sister's. He also took this as a new discovery. He grabbed his mother's hand and called out happily. He wanted his mother to see him too. Is it your child's turn? Fei Fei's mother asked curiously. Wu Jingjing smiled and stroked Tong Tong's hair. She said to him, "It's Mommy's sister's turn. My daughter is in group 33, so it should be her turn soon." Little Momo was carried back by Mo Fei. Under the interpretation of her mother, the little girl finally recognized that the girl who was held by her father and wearing a swimsuit was her biological sister. Hee. Tong Tong was so happy to see Shishi. He sat in his mother's arms and wiggled his butt restlessly. He even danced as if he was preparing for the competition. Sure enough, his sister was the best. If there was something fun, she would share it with him. If there was something delicious, she would share it with him. Moreover, his sister could do many magical things, such as reading stories to him or drawing pictures. Compared to this little sister, who didn't know how to play the rattle drum, Tong Tong was much more fun. Come on, let's cheer for our sister. Murphy smiled with satisfaction. She held the little boy's hand and patted it gently. She whispered, "Come on, come on, come on." She followed her father's footsteps and lined up. They slowly approached the competition venue and came to the side of the red swimming pool. When the match was about to begin, the young lady saw a few solemn referees by the side of the court. She saw the lifeguards wearing life jackets and saw the crowd around the court and in the stands. Faced with such a formal situation, she began to feel a little nervous. Yang Yi held her little hand, and the little girl walked closer and closer to her father. Finally, when they reached her lane, she stuck close to her father's side. She pursed her lips and looked left and right. Suddenly, she felt her father pinch her little hand. Then she saw him say, "Don't be afraid." The venue was a little noisy because the broadcast was still broadcasting the situation of Team 32. She could only vaguely hear her father's voice. Fortunately, Yang Yi saw the girl's confused eyes in time. He squatted down and smiled gently. "Are you nervous?" She shook her head, too embarrassed to admit it. "It's okay. It's just like swimming at home. As long as you have the courage to swim, no matter what the result is, you will have improved. Then Daddy will follow you and watch you swim. We will walk from one side to the other and wait for you at the finishing point on the opposite side. I'm waiting to cheer for you." Yang Yi pointed to the finish line 50 meters away and laughed. She nodded her little head obediently. Yang Yi saw that she was still a little nervous, so he smiled and pointed to the grandstand. "Oh yeah, look. Mommy and little brother are waiting to cheer for you over there." She looked in the direction her father was pointing and really saw her mother waving at her. Shishi's mood suddenly lightened up, and she happily waved back in her mother's direction. However, at this time, there were already people urging the children to get into the water. After all, this was only an amateur competition. For safety reasons, the organizers did not allow diving into the water. "Do your best. Daddy believes in you. You are the best." Yang Yi saw that the little girl had put on her swimming goggles. He smiled and shook her fist as he encouraged her. The little girl who had put on her swimming goggles and swimming cap did not look as beautiful as she usually did without her pair of clear and bright eyes, and the embellishment of her soft black hair. However, the little girl still had some baby fat on her face, delicate little nose and small mouth. She still gave people a feeling of wanting to pinch her cuteness. She looked up and giggled at her father, and shyly shook her little butt. She was acting coquettishly with her father. Yang Yi was relieved because looking at the little girl's appearance, it meant that she had returned to her initial state. She was very natural and relaxed. She followed the other girls and obediently followed their usual practice at home. They followed the wall of the pool and slowly slid into the water. This was a children's swimming competition, so the depth of the pool was only 1 meter. When she stepped on the bottom of the pool, her head, neck, and even a little of her shoulder were above the water. However, for the other little girls, the depth of the water was already above their necks, and their chins would occasionally touch the surface of the water. This was not a problem. After all, the children who dared to participate in the competition all knew how to swim. Some of the more active ones had already started to step on the water to float themselves. Moreover, there were lifeguards on the shore watching them one by one. Once they were in the water, Yang Yi could not guide them anymore. He and the other parents were invited to the side of the shore to watch the competition. However, when it was time to leave his daughter's side, Yang Yi realized that he could not calm down at all. He could not help but look back at his daughter's position every few steps. Even he himself did not know what he was worried about. This was because he also knew that she was a good swimmer. This 1-meter deep pool was not a challenge at all. However, if he did not look at Shishi now, his heart would not be at ease. Just as he stood by the pool, before Yang Yi could wave to Shishi to signal his position, the starter was already at the starting point. He raised the starting gun and shouted loudly, "Everyone, get to your positions." According to the rules of the competition, before Shishi and the rest came to the pool, someone had already specially instructed them. The strict requirement was that they could only start swimming when they heard the starting gun. Otherwise, it would be considered a race start, and there would be a rematch. Therefore, when they heard the "everyone, get to your positions," now one after another, the children followed their own habits. They either leaned back against the pool, leaned forward slightly, arched their legs, and kicked the pool with their feet. Like backstroke, they grabbed the edge of the pool with both hands and faced the pool wall. In any case, there were all kinds of things that they were prepared for. It's time to get ready. Yang Yi nervously clenched his fists and stretched his neck, as if he wanted to remind Shishi. Fortunately, when he saw that Shishi was prepared in the second position very naturally, just like in her usual training, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. This little girl is doing well. Yang Yi could not help but feel a little proud. He beamed with joy and thought to himself, although she has not received professional training, she is still very smart. Even in such an occasion, she is not afraid. She does not flinch. She is indeed my daughter. At this moment, Yang Yi's mood was like a roller coaster. One moment he was relaxed, and the next he was nervous. It was as if it wasn't Cece who was competing, but him. No, it should be that he was facing a duel of life and death. After all, a small competition couldn't scare Yang Yi. His current level of nervousness was almost comparable to the feeling of his adrenaline surging when he encountered a major crisis in his previous life. As a matter of fact, when the starter shouted "ready," Yang Yi forcibly cut off his complacent reverie and quickly concentrated on watching the competition. Bang! A small cloud of white smoke came out of the starting gun. It's starting. Oh. Shishi started slowly. When Yang Yi saw that Shishi was half a body's length behind the others, he anxiously clenched his fists and stared at her. Chapter 1179. Although Yang Yi looked anxious, in fact, after the competition started, Shishi and the other children only made some splashes in the water. Then, like little turtles, they slowly wriggled forward. Don't listen to the saying, after the starting gun sounds, the athletes shoot out like arrows. That was only used to describe track and field competitions. The scene in the pool brought people back to reality. After all, it was only a competition for 7-year-old girls, and they were basically amateurs. Even if they made big movements in the water and made splashes, they couldn't be fast. From the shore, they swam slowly. Yang Yi stared at Shishi's position and walked steadily, keeping up with their speed. But the stands and the shore were much livelier. Go ran. Go guagua. Go guagua. Especially beside Yang Yi. The parents who accompanied him cheered one after another. Looking at their flushed faces, Yang Yi, who was always calm, seemed to be infected at this moment. He nervously watched Shishi's order in the pool, and excitedly raised his hands to his mouth to hold up the loudspeaker. He loudly commanded, "Steady, maintain the rhythm of your breathing. Beat your legs a little faster." Yang Yi was so engrossed that he forgot that he was shouting so far away, and that Shishi couldn't hear him at all in the water. Like the other parents, he couldn't wait to transmit all his strength to their children through shouting. Even if they knew in their hearts that it was futile, so what? At this moment, how could Yang Yi think so much? He could just shout. In the pool, the one swimming in the first place was a little girl from the 6th lane. She started faster than Shi by more than half a body's length. When she swam in the water, her swimming posture was very standard. She swung her arms left and right, breathed, and beat her legs at a very fast rhythm. One look and one could tell that she had been trained for a long time. Because she started slower, she was currently in 3rd place. However, the little girl didn't seem to notice this situation. She swam leisurely as if she was swimming in her own pool. However, it had to be said that among the 5 children, Shishi's swimming posture was the best. It couldn't be helped. Who asked the little girl to have long legs and long arms? It was also freestyle, but Shishi's long arms rotated and moved like a butterfly flapping its wings. The arc was beautiful and full of movement. Shishi's long legs slapped the water. The splashes weren't big, but the rhythm was light and gentle, causing her colorful skirt to flutter, giving off a fresh and cute feeling of a little mermaid playing in the water. The little girl's swimming rhythm was neither fast nor slow. Her movements were relatively quiet, but her speed wasn't slow at all. Perhaps it was because she had more strength every time she swung her arms, or perhaps it was because her long legs provided more thrust. The little girl's slender body was like a shuttle, silently shuttling forward. Gradually, she caught up from 3rd place to 2nd place, and was about half a body's length away from 1st place. At this moment, they were only about halfway through the swim. However, the previous sprint had consumed a lot of energy. Many of the children started to slow down. After all, they were only 7 or 8 years old girls. In terms of physical strength, they definitely couldn't compare to adults or professional athletes. Even the little girl from the 6th lane, who was swimming in 1st place, slowed down a little. Although she had undergone professional training, it was inevitable that she would slow down a little. This gave Shishi a chance to catch up. Although Shishi was usually soft and weak, her strength and stamina were the best among the children her age. Of course, this was partly due to innate factors, but it was also due to acquired efforts. Since she was 4 years old, under the guidance of her father, she would exercise for a period of time almost every morning before breakfast. Recently, she had even resumed light martial arts practice. Naturally, her physical strength was now showing. Shishi was still swimming at the same pace as before. She didn't seem to have any intention of slowing down. Slowly, at about 30 meters, Shishi began to catch up with the little girl from the 6th lane. Tian, swim faster. Someone is catching up to you. At the edge of the pool, the little girl's mother was so anxious that she stomped her feet and yelled. But at this time, the parents' yelling was in vain. The last 10 meters or so were the last moments for these little girls to fight with their last bit of willpower. Yang Yi was also very anxious. Now that he heard others yelling, although he didn't want to continue yelling like he was showing off, he was also holding his breath nervously. He was sweating for his daughter in his heart. She passed. Yang Yi suddenly raised his eyebrows and a hint of joy appeared in the corner of his eyes. He couldn't help but glance proudly at the little girl's mother. Then he quickly reflected on himself. I can't be happy yet. It's too early to be happy. It was as if he was the one competing. But that was indeed the case. Yang Yi once again felt that it was actually the parents who were suffering when their children were competing or taking exams. At about the last 10 meters, the little mermaid from the 4th lane finally began to slow down. She seemed to be a little tired. After all, Shishi was also a normal person. Although the extent of Shishi's slowing down was not that much compared to the other children, she still maintained a faster speed and a certain lead. But when he saw Shishi slowing down, Yang Yi couldn't help but feel a little anxious. Come on. Come on. Yang Yi didn't dare to walk too fast. He maintained a horizontal line with his daughter. He didn't care about other people's eyes. He clapped his hands and shouted rhythmically, Come on. Hang in there a little longer. You'll reach the finish line soon. Yang Yi watched anxiously as his daughter swam in front. She still had a lead of a body length, and was about to reach the finish line of 50 meters. It looked like she was going to win. Yang Yi's emotions were in turmoil. One moment, he wanted to secretly get excited. The next moment, he was worried that his secret excitement would be discovered by God, and that God would throw a plot twist. He could only suppress this impulse. He pursed his lips, gritted his teeth, and followed closely behind. Even when Shishi was about to touch the edge of the pool with a lead of more than a body length, Yang Yi was still worried. He was afraid that the little girl would hit her head. He kept a close eye on her and quickly went around to the finish line. Fortunately, Shishi was wearing swimming goggles and could see the edge of the pool. Just as she usually did in training, her little hand touched the edge of the pool, and then slowly slid over. She grabbed the edge of the pool and stood up to catch her breath. Yang Yi finally felt relieved. He didn't have to continue being nervous. His originally tense and fierce face was now blooming with a warm smile. She won. Shishi had just poked her head out of the water. The water flowed down from the swimming cap and washed the little girl's smooth little face. She opened her mouth to breathe and wiped the water on her face with her little hand. She looked around as if she was looking for something. "Here, Daddy is here." Yang Yi's voice was no longer calm. There was only joy in it. He rushed in front of his daughter and called out with a smile, "Papa." The little girl was panting slightly. She took off her uncomfortable swimming goggles, revealing a pair of big eyes that were still bright and lovely even though there were some red marks around them. Her slightly curled eyelashes fluttered as she looked at her father with some dependence. Her voice was muffled and sticky as she called out to him. Chapter 1180. After swimming for 50 meters, they were still swimming with all their might. The girls were exhausted. The girl from 6th Avenue hugged her arms to the side of the pool. This way, her chest could be above the water surface so that she wouldn't feel suffocated. Shishi was the same. She stood in the water for a few seconds, and then stretched out her two little wet arms, wanting her father to carry her out. Turn around," Yang Yi said with a smile. He didn't mind that his daughter was covered in water. He handed the camera to his left hand and stretched out his right hand. It was as if he was fishing for a fish. His thick arm went under Cece's armpit, and then held the other side of her body, and then gently pulled. Ee. Shishi put her chin on her father's arm, and her two little arms clamped her father's strong arm. She was pulled out of the water by her father, as if he was pulling a radish. Shishi was already taller than her peers, and even comparable to Yu Xiaowei, who was 8 or 9 years old. However, at this moment, she was easily carried by her father, which reflected the difference in height and body size between her and her father. Papa was still that reliable Papa. Just like Superman, he had super big and inexhaustible strength. Shishi giggled happily and deepened this concept in her heart that she had never shaken. Originally, the little girl was a little tired after swimming for 50 meters, but now that she was carried out of the water by her father, she landed lightly on the ground as if she was riding on the clouds. Shishi's eyes flashed with excitement, and she had long forgotten about the feeling of fatigue. Yang Yi put the wet little girl down. He did not care about his clothes that were wet because of Shishi. He first shook the bath towel that he had just draped over his shoulders, and put it on Shishi's two little shoulders, for fear that she would catch a cold. Shishi was obediently manipulated by her father, but she still raised her little head excitedly and told her father about her new discovery, just now. Papa, let me tell you. This pool is super big, and I swam for a long time. I thought I was going to reach it, but I haven't reached it yet. It's not like our home. Even Xian Air's pool is not as big as this. So today's swimming is still rewarding. At least you have seen how the swimming competitions on TV are like, right? Yang Yi said with a smile. Yes. Shishi nodded repeatedly. At this moment, the girl from the 6 paths, who was still panting, had also come out of the pool. Her mother was very regretful and nagged at the side. You swam very well in the beginning, and you were always the first, but why did you swim slowly later? I was overtaken by someone. I was so close, Sai, so close. Interestingly, among the several parents around, she was the only one who kept nagging. It seemed that this failure was a bit difficult for her to accept. In contrast, the other children's parents seemed to see that the gap was too big, and they were not as hostile as they were at the beginning. They just smiled and helped their children wipe their faces, comforted them in a low voice, and told their children to continue to work hard next time. Because they were a little close to each other, the mother's nagging, which was not scolding, but with a tone of reproach, could be heard. Yang heard it and felt a little harsh. He thought to himself, isn't this increasing the frustration caused by the failure? How can the child accept it? Yang turned his head and took a look. Sure enough, the little girl named Tian lowered her head dejectedly, and her eyes were a little red. Seeing her father's movements, Cece couldn't help but poke her head out to take a look. She muttered in a low voice, Papa, that sister seems to be about to cry. Cece only thought that because she was taller than others, she was older than others. However, Cece, who had just turned 7 years old, compared to the other children in this group of 7 or 8 years old, it was hard to tell who was older and who was younger. Yang really did not have the right to intervene when others disciplined their children, unless it was too much. Therefore, in order not to affect Shishi, he smiled and helped Shishi take off her swimming cap, and said, don't worry, she just feels bad because she didn't win the game. Let's go and see Xian Air's game. She is also about to start. When Xian Air's game is over, let's go and find Mom to change clothes. The pool in the red zone began to clear, because the next group of athletes would come over to prepare for the game after the judges finished tabulating the data. In the blue zone, when Shishi was about to reach the finish line, the announcer had already announced the names of the contestants in the 33rd group. According to the rhythm just now, Lon Xian's game was about to start. Okay, I want to see Xian Air's game. Shishi suddenly forgot everything else, and happily took her father's hand and shouted in a clear voice. Before leaving the pool in the red zone, Yang had to ask the judge about Shishi's score. After all, this swimming game was a one-off event, and the scores of the multiple groups would be counted together, and the top 8 would be given special rewards. The other children would also have participation awards. Now that Shishi had won first place in his group, Yang Yi's originally calm heart could not help but become restless. Maybe Shishi could also squeeze into the top 8. She's in the 4th lane, right? Yes, she's in the 4th lane. She's in the first place. Yang Yi could not help but say the last half of the sentence, and he was probably a little proud in his heart. Just as Yang Yi was talking to the judge, suddenly they heard the starting gun, and the excited cheers came from the blue zone. Shishi, who was standing next to her father and watching eagerly, suddenly turned around and anxiously jumped up. Oh, Xian Air's game has started. Papa, hurry up, let's go and see. The little girl was so anxious that she even forgot to be shy. Under the gaze of other adults and children, she hurriedly took her father's hand and wanted to drag him to Lon Xian's game. Don't jump, be careful not to slip. Anyway, it has already started. Yang Yi hurriedly pulled her back. The pool was wet everywhere, and Shishi was barefooted. Yang Yi was worried that the little girl would accidentally fall down while jumping. The judge said without raising his head, you want to watch the Blue Zone's game, right? It's no use being anxious. You are not a contestant, and you are not a designated family member. You can't get close to the pool. The effect of watching from here is the same as watching from outside later. Is there such a rule? Shishi held her father's hand and looked at the judge in surprise, a little incredulous. Yang Yi patted the little girl's back and said with a smile, yes, only Xian Air's father can watch from the pool, so we don't need to be anxious. Shishi understood now. She pouted her little mouth, shook her father's arm a little unhappily, and whispered, But I still want to cheer for Xian Air, and I also want to watch Xian Air's game, but I can't see it here. In the end, Shishi still saw the scene of Lon Xian swimming to the finish line. After asking about her result, Yang Yi took her as close to the Blue Zone's pool as possible, and then picked the little girl up high. He carried Shishi on one of his shoulders as if he was carrying rice, and raised his right arm, as if he was in a gym position, using the biceps and shoulder of his right arm to make a platform for Shishi to sit comfortably on. Xian Air is in the 2nd lane, counting from here. Yang Yi pointed with his left hand to remind Shishi. Sitting on her father's broad shoulders and arms, Shishi looked down at Xian Air in the 2nd lane, and she reported to her father in surprise. Hey Papa, I see it, I'm almost there. Exian Air seems to be in first place too. Chapter 1181. Exian Air got first place? Yang Yi asked in confusion when he heard Shishi's excited cheers. Yang Yi knew that Lan Exian was a good swimmer. After all, she was buoyant in the water. When she swam at home, she was almost as good as Shishi. But this time, they were swimming in a 50-meter lane. Such a distance was not easy for children of her age. Shishi started to feel tired towards the end of the race. Lan Exian's physical condition was not as good as Shishi's, so it was also a big challenge for her to swim the full 50-meter lane with all her strength. When they began to stand still and watch the race in the blue pool was coming to an end. However, Lan Exian's group did not perform as well as Shishi's group. There was a clear gap in strength between them. Yang Yi felt that in the final stage, Lan Exian was only at the front. There were two other children who were running neck and neck with her. And as Yang Yi expected, Lan Exian swam very slowly towards the end. Yang Yi could not help but worry about her. Shishi, who was sitting on her father's shoulder, hugged her father's head and smiled. She said firmly, Exian Air will definitely get first place. I believe that Exian Air can also get first place. While waiting for Lan Exian to come out, Yang Yi received a call from Murphy. After watching Lan Exian's race, Murphy could not help but call him in a hurry to ask about Shishi's situation. She's doing well. She got first place in 1 minute and 24 seconds. She's the first in her group. Yang Yi smiled and reported to Murphy, I don't know much about Exian Air's race. It seems that the gap between the top three is not big. I don't know what the specific results will be. Exian Air also got first place. Shishi smiled brightly at the side. She took her father's hand and jumped up and down, trying to convey her words to her mother. Come on, you talk to mom. Yang Yi saw her so eager, had no choice but to hand the phone to Shishi. The little girl leaned against her father's thigh and hugged her phone as she spoke to her mother. At first, it was Murphy who asked her. Perhaps she was concerned about her condition after the swim, but Shishi replied sweetly, No. It's just that I was a little tired at the end, but I don't feel tired anymore. I don't know either. Papa said that I was swimming so fast that I couldn't see them. Shishi was holding the phone with a towel between them. Obviously, she felt a little awkward. She quickly pulled off one side of the towel, revealing her right arm. Just like how Tibetans wore their sleeves during the day, she emptied her right hand to hold the phone and talked to her mother. It was as if a seal had been lifted. Cece seized the opportunity and excitedly shared her swimming experience with her mother, as well as her new experience in this professional swimming pool. Fortunately, Murphy knew her daughter's habits too well. She interrupted Shishi in time and said with a smile, Wait a minute, Shishi, your brother also has something to say to you. Brother, are you watching it too? Shishi asked in surprise. Of course, your brother is cheering for you. Murphy handed the phone to Tong Tong and said with a smile, Tong Tong, come on, tell your sister. Sister, you can do it, sister, you can do it, sister. Tong Tong was just brainwashed by his mother. He curiously grabbed his mother's phone and muttered perfunctorily, Street home. He didn't know what it meant, but it was very interesting. Tong Tong was influenced by his mother and said a few words. Of course, he couldn't see his sister now, so the little guy's enthusiasm decreased a lot. She heard her brother cheering for her. Although she was confused, wasn't this Tong Tong's usual style of speaking? She smiled happily and said sweetly, I didn't even know. I'm going to ask my brother when I go back. He watched my competition, that is, did he see me swim super fast? After letting Shishi chat with her mother for a while, Yang Yi saw Lan Exian and Lance Hao Kai getting ready to come out. He stopped the little girl and asked Murphy and Wu Jingjing to come down. They still had to take the two girls to change their clothes. Exian Air, are you first? Shishi was very happy to see Lan Exian. She couldn't wait to run over and hold Lan Exian's little hand, and asked excitedly. Of course, I swim super fast. Lan Exian panted slightly and her little face was a little pale. But at this moment, she was still in high spirits and said proudly, Shishi was right? At this time, Lance Hao Kai shook his head and exposed the little girl with a smile. You're still showing off. This time, it was thrilling to get first place. Fortunately, you swam well in the beginning. You swam slowly in the end and almost got caught by others. You're only one hand's distance away from the second place. Brother Lan, don't be so demanding. If you can swim first in the group, you're still first. Yang Yi clapped his hands and encouraged Lan Xian with a smile. However, Shishi pouted and complained. But just now when I said Xian Air was first, Papa, you didn't believe me. I didn't see it just now, but now I'm sure. First place is very good. Just right, the two of us are first. Yang Yi rubbed the heads of the two little girls with a smile and said, Today both of you performed very well. No matter what the result is, hard work is victory. Even Xian Air swam to the finish line so hard. Papa Lan and I are cheering for you. Yes, Xian Air swam to the end not easy. Lance Hao Kai also followed Yang Yi's excuse and applauded his daughter with a smile. Lan Xian pouted a little unconvinced at first, but now she relied on Yang Yi to speak for her. She looked at Yang Yi and tried to complain. Isn't that so? I'm exhausted, so I swam slow. It's so long. It's not easy to swim. Shishi said it would be tiring. Shishi nodded quickly and said, Yes, it's very tiring to swim to the end. It's okay. You've already given Papa Yang and your father a big surprise by swimming to the end. Yang Yi hurriedly comforted her in a soft voice. Now that you've won first place, it's even more delightful. Very good. Lan Xian wiped away her unhappy expression and smiled. She pestered Yang Yi and said coquettishly, Then Papa Yang, can I eat more ice cream with Shishi? We're all so tired from swimming. Yes. We also want ice cream. Shishi suddenly remembered. However, at this time, the little girl was a little like a useless teammate. She enthusiastically interrupted Lan Xian and said, But Xian Air, we have to wait until we get home to eat ice cream. There's no ice cream here. Lan Xian's 50-meter swimming time was 1 minute and 32 seconds, which was slower than Shishi's 1 minute and 24 seconds. However, when the two girls finished showering and came out in dry clothes, the competition for the 7 to 8-year-old girls group had already ended. Yang Yi and Lance Hao Kai took the children and stopped for a while, waiting for the final results to be announced. Shishi's results should be enough to compete for the top 8, Lance Hao Kai and Yang Yi discussed. Yang Yi was a little modest, but he was still looking forward to it. However, to Yang Yi's surprise, he had underestimated the strength of the children in Jiangcheng. Although Shishi and Lan Xian were ranked first in the group, when the final results of all the contestants were announced, Shishi was only ranked 12th. Lan Xian didn't need to think, she was ranked even lower. The fastest swimmer was a girl named Su Yingying, who swam in 56 seconds. The second and third places' results had already exceeded 1 minute. She must be a professional swimmer. At the announcement area, Yang Yi, who was full of anticipation, squeezed in to see the results and heard people talking about the top few children. After all, they were only 7 or 8 years old girls. To swim under 1 minute, it could be said that they were very strong. Yang Yi clicked his tongue lightly. He originally thought that Shishi was very strong, but he didn't expect that compared to the real strong people, there was still a big gap in strength. Shishi was only ranked 12th, which meant that there were no strong opponents in the group that she and Lan Xian were in. Perhaps even though Lance Hao Kai had spoken to the sports administration, the people at the sports administration still secretly gave him some face. However, after knowing the results, Yang Yi, who was originally a little expectant, was relieved. He went back to the two girls and said with a smile, Okay, you didn't make it to the top 8, but it's okay. You did very well today, and there will be awards for you later. I heard that there will be a small prize too. But there won't be any trophies, Shishi whispered as she hugged her father's hand. She regretfully turned to look at the workbench, where there were 8 small golden trophies. Of course, there were also stacks of awards and notebooks. These were all small prizes that every contestant could get. They could print out the names in advance, so they didn't have to rush to write them out one by one. In addition to these and the trophies, there was also a bucket of peanut oil for the top 8. The prize for the champion was a floor fan that was most needed in the summer. These prizes were all sponsored by Haokai's company. Xixi looked forward to those trophies the most. She felt that they were very beautiful. However, before Yang Yi could comfort her, Lan Xian said loudly, "Aya Xixi, what's the big deal? Isn't it just a trophy? If there's no trophy, then there's no trophy. Let's go out and buy ice cream to eat." Xixi emotions were brought out by Lan Xian, and she couldn't help but giggle. "Okay. Xian air, I didn't want to eat at first, but you made me want to eat." Chapter 1182. The swimming competition was over. For the two girls, the positive impact of this short period of time still needed time to ferment. But for now, Xixi and the others quickly put this matter to the back of their minds the next day, and turned their attention to other new things. Especially Lan Xian, who was finally freed from her homework, and could enjoy the precious last month of summer vacation to her heart's content. It was worth mentioning that although there were no reporters at the scene, the media still received some news from the public. The next day, related reports appeared on the internet. The conscientious media only stated the fact that Yang Yi had brought a child to participate in the swimming competition. A few photos of Xixi secretly taken by the informant made the fans unable to help but excitedly comment below. "Wow, I haven't seen Xixi in a long time. The little girl is getting prettier by the day." The competition isn't important. What's important is that Xixi rarely appears on camera. Look at her coming out of the pool, being carried by Yang Yi. She's so adorable. This is the so-called lotus flower that emerges from the water. Xixi's side profile is even better. I'm almost mesmerized by this little fairy. In the photo mentioned above, isn't the dress that Xixi is wearing a little too mature? How old is Xixi? Does she need to wear such a beautiful dress? The dress that was being discussed here was the clean and fresh new clothes that Xixi had changed into after the competition. It was a white t-shirt with English words on it, paired with a black lace pleated skirt. The skirt was neither too long nor too short, just reaching her knees. The combination of black and white looked simple and elegant, yet it gave off a fashionable and elegant feeling. Of course, if one looked at the little girl's freshly washed hair, which was still wet and a little curly, the static Xixi in this photo indeed gave off a mature feeling of a young lady. Especially when he looked at the little girl's exquisite side profile. That was the feeling of being moved. But after all, this was just a still photo. When Xixi calmed down, she did indeed have the quiet beauty of a girl next door. But usually Xixi was lively and loved to laugh. If they saw Xixi at the scene, perhaps no one would think that she was mature. They would only wonder why this cute little girl was dressed so well. And it was worth mentioning that this dress was not bought by Murphy. It was just one of the clothes that Xixi's grandmother, Zhou Mingyu, had bought for her when she was in Jiang City this year. Xixi felt that her grandmother had a good taste. She liked all the clothes that her grandmother had picked for her. Of course, the netizen who posted that comment was quickly mocked by the netizens behind him. "I'm a girl, so I have to speak up for Xixi. What's wrong with Xixi dressing nicely? To be honest, I didn't know how envious I was of Xixi. She had parents who were so good at picking out clothes for her. When I was young, I was so envious when I saw other friends wearing beautiful dresses." "That's right. Our Xixi is wearing a dress and you're criticizing her. How bored are you? If you don't want to look, hurry up and leave." Speaking of which, Xixi wearing a nice dress isn't big news, is it? Their family is so rich. When Xixi doesn't dress well, I'll think it's big news, because it must be my father-in-law who mistreats my wife. Ha 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 ha. Someone come, drag the person above me out. Another one has gone crazy. To be honest, I think Yang Yi's child is considered good. You know, the children of those celebrities wear all kinds of branded clothes. At such a young age, they carry luxury bags that cost more than 100,000 yuan. I've never seen such a situation with Xixi. Yang Yi is already a billionaire. He doesn't indulge his child in spending money extravagantly. He just buys her nicer clothes. Do you want to criticize him? There were still many people who supported Yang Yi and Xixi. However, compared to these conscientious media, some media that liked to stir up trouble weren't so honest. Among them, Beijing X Daily deliberately distorted the facts. They seized on the fact that the competition was sponsored by Landshau Kai's company and fabricated news that Shishi and Lan Xian received preferential treatment in the competition. This caused many parents to be dissatisfied with the news in an attempt to stir up more debate. Although the influence of Beijing X Daily was a little weak, and there were other big media reports in front of it, this fabricated news couldn't cause any ripples. However, it was considered a big mess. Yang Yi wasn't like some ordinary people or celebrities who cherished their wings. They wouldn't swallow their anger when they encountered such grievances. At the beginning of this year, Yang Yi had already invested in a few powerful law firms in Jiangnan. Now, in less than 2 days, Yang Yi had already organized a scary team of lawyers and directly reported Beijing X Daily to court. Warning? Asking for an apology? No way. See you in court directly. Let's not talk about these trivial matters. In early August, after Yang Yi accompanied Murphy to 2 concerts, their work temporarily came to an end. According to Yang Yi's plan, before Shishi started school, they would go back to their hometown in Anqing to stay for a while and accompany the old people who didn't want to leave the village. I also want to go to Shishi's grandfather's house to play. Lan Xian knew that her little friend was going back to her hometown, so she wanted to follow. Shishi, I'll be very bored if you're not at home. Shishi naturally wouldn't refuse. After all, she specially ran over to tell Lan Xian about this matter because she also wanted to invite Lan Xian along, just like how Lan Xian invited her to her hometown at the beginning of the holidays. Although Shishi didn't go at that time, she still had to return the favor. However, Shishi didn't expect that Lan Xian would bring it up herself. This was even better, as it saved her some trouble. Shishi said happily, "Okay, Xian, come with me. Let's go to my grandfather's house to play." However, when Wu Jingjing heard this, she was surprised that Lan Xian wanted to go to such a faraway village to play. She quickly shook her head and said, "No." "Why not?" Lan Xian asked anxiously. "Because when you go to Shishi's grandfather's house, the weather will be very hot. There's no air conditioning, no TV, and it's so far from the city. It's different from our hometown," Wu Jingjing said. Shishi stood aside and blinked her big eyes. She said very innocently, "No, we have air conditioning and TV at home. My father and I will stay at my grandfather's house during the spring festival. My grandfather's house is super big. Yes, there's air conditioning. I'm not afraid." Lan Xian shouted excitedly after she got Shishi's help. Wu Jingjing and Yang Yi, who didn't let Shishi go to Lan Xian's hometown at that time, actually had the same idea. She was just worried that her daughter would go to such a remote village. Therefore, she racked her brains to think of a reason to refuse. "Xian, there's nothing fun in the countryside. Think about it. The last time we went to Shishi's hometown, there was no shopping mall or other shops." "Oh right, there's no shop." The honest Shishi scratched her head and said awkwardly, "I don't want a shop. I can play with Shishi at her grandfather's house." Shishi said that her grandfather's house has a lot of chicks and big cattle. Lan Xian was unmoved and said firmly. Shishi nodded quickly and said with a smile, "Yes, my grandfather's house is very fun. The steamed buns are also grown there. We'll take the steamed buns to our grandfather's house. Then my grandmother will cook delicious food. My grandmother is also very good at cooking. Xian, you'll definitely like it. I'm not afraid, because your father will go back to his hometown with us. There will definitely be delicious food," Lan Xian said proudly. The 2 girls chattered, and Wu Jingjing really didn't know what to do with them. Fortunately, when Lan Zhoukai came back from the company at noon and heard about it, he didn't have as many concerns as Wu Jingjing. He decided immediately. It's good to let Xian see the world. Besides, she's with Yang Yi. What's there to be afraid of? Chapter 1183. My hometown is really different every day. Every time I come back, I feel like it has changed a lot. In the car, Murphy, who was pointing at the crops outside to teach Shishi and Lan Xian, couldn't help but turn her head and say to Yang Yi with emotion, "Wasn't that right?" More than 2 years ago, when Murphy first went back to her hometown with Yang Yi, Wadayaka village was still a small village located in a remote mountain valley. Whether it was transportation or information, it was a little inaccessible. Even if Yang Yi was driving a Tyrant Wolf pickup truck that could go off-road, it took a long time to get back to their hometown near dawn. Now Yang Yi was driving his wife and children, as well as a little foodie, back home. From the county town, along a straight road, it took less than an hour and a half to arrive at the entrance of the village. Of course, this change had been realized a year ago. The new change that surprised Murphy was the overall new plan of Wadayaku Village. Thanks to the business cooperation between Wadayaku Village and the Sahara Online Mall over the years, whether it was the village-run company or the families in the village, they all made a lot of money. The money earned by the village-run collective enterprises, in addition to the New Year dividends, was invested in the construction of the village's internal road network. In addition, the village also funded the leveling of a large square with a cement floor at the village entrance. This was not the village's cultural square. The cultural square was located at the original martial arts practice field where Yang Chonggui taught kung fu. It was said that the construction would start next month. The village square that Murphy saw now was a logistics station for Wadayaku Village or other surrounding villages to sell agricultural products to the outside world. It was the peanut harvest season. 2 or 3 large trucks from the Sahara Express and 3 or 4 large trucks from other dealers were parked in the square. The farmers, on the other hand, were smiling as they called for their ox carts or drove their light trucks to carry their peanuts from all directions. The smart people also set up small shelters around the square to sell some iced mineral water, watermelons, homemade juice, and other products to relieve the heat. Many drivers came to patronize. The bustling scene could not be compared to the county or town, but in Murphy's opinion, it had already brought infinite vitality and hope to the small village of Wadayaku. Yang Yi drove carefully, avoiding a small pickup truck that had unloaded its cargo and left easily. Then he smiled and said to Murphy, "This is all thanks to Qing Zi and the other young people. They dared to think and do it." Before Yang Yi could finish, his car circled around the square. Just as he was about to enter the village, a yellow and black fence appeared under the village gate of Wadayaku Village in front of him. "If there's a barrier here, is it to prevent outside cars from entering?" Yang Yi muttered to himself in surprise. He slowed down the car and slowly stopped in front of the barrier. She couldn't sit still. When the little girl heard what her father said, she couldn't help but pull the seat belt and try to sit up. She stuck her head out from the middle to see what her father was talking about. Because of the terrain, Yang Yi didn't see the situation at the village gate. It turned out that in addition to the barrier, there was a security booth behind it. Hearing the sound of the car, an old man in his 60s who was reading a newspaper walked out from the booth. He held the newspaper and slowly walked over from the pedestrian passageway, wanting to see whose car it was and why it came. Yang Yi found the old man's information from his memory. He pressed down the window and greeted him with a smile. "Uncle Zitting." Dong Zitting was also from Dong Yue's side. The old man couldn't do farm work anymore, but he didn't want to retire at home. Probably because of this reason, he was hired by the village to guard the gate. Dong Zitting was a little presbyopic, so he had to get closer to recognize Yang Yi. The old man smiled in surprise. "Tizi, you're back. You changed your car again. I remember that when you came back during the spring festival, you didn't drive this car." "Uncle Zitting, you have a good memory." Yang Yi smiled and said, "There are more people coming back this time, so I changed my car." After chatting for a while, Dong Zitting quickly went back to help Yang Yi open the barrier. Yang Yi also just figured out why this gate was set up. While driving, he explained to Mo Fei, who didn't quite understand their local accent, "I see. Previously, some dealers were greedy for convenience and drove their trucks directly to the village to collect goods. But the road conditions in the village are complicated. Once an ox cart was knocked over, and it almost crushed a person. So now they have set up a checkpoint at the entrance of the village to prevent big cars and other cars from entering the village. All the big cars are arranged in the square we saw just now." Murphy suddenly understood and said with some emotion, "This is the right way to deal with it. Otherwise, if she and Xionaire were playing in the village, I would be worried about them running around with other children. It's so dangerous. Not only that, But Yang Yi also had to drive carefully through 2 speed bumps at every intersection. Even though the chassis of his car was well adjusted, the series of vibrations still made Shishi and Lan Xian, who were behind him, sway from side to side. It was very annoying. However, this was all for the sake of safety. In order to deal with these speed bumps, Yang Yi would take the initiative to reduce the speed every time. Naturally, this would also prevent them from colliding with motorcycles or children running out of the intersection. The 6-meter-wide road in the village was actually so meticulous. It was no wonder that Yang Yi heard from Yang Huan that Dong Qi was going to retire to the second line of the village next year, and everyone was going to elect Yang Qing as the new village chief. Of course, this shaking was a new and interesting experience for Lan Xian and Shishi. The 2 girls swayed in the back seat, one leaning against the other, and the next, they giggled. However, Shishi's laughter suddenly stopped. She shouted in surprise, "Hey, I see little auntie. Where is she? Where is Sister Huan Huan?" Lan Xian's loud voice also lit up. She enthusiastically squeezed together with Shishi and looked over from the middle. "At the door. Look, that's our home," Sisi replied in a crisp voice. Lan Xian widened her round eyes and tried to identify her. "I saw Sister Huan Huan too. But this is your home?" "Sai, I don't remember." "I remember, because I just came back during the spring festival." Shishi giggled and said, "Look here, when we came back during the spring festival, Uncle Huang's family next door had just built this small house." Shishi was referring to the 2-story Western-style house next to the Yang family's house. Most families in the village had started to build houses now. After all, they were rich, and everyone wanted to build houses for their children and grandchildren to marry now or in the future. The 2 girls chatted happily. Unfortunately, they couldn't open the car window. They could only wait for Yang Yi to drive into the yard and stop the car. Murphy unbuckled their seatbelts, and Shishi couldn't wait to jump out of the car. The little girl cheered and threw herself at Yang Huan. She said coquettishly in a sticky voice, "Little auntie, why did you come back earlier than us?" Yang Huan could only bend over and hug her. She smiled and said, "Because I'm on vacation like you guys." "You're going to have summer vacation too? You're an adult." Lan Xian shouted from behind. Yang Huan laughed. She deliberately shouted at Lan Xian, "Why can't I have summer vacation? I'm still a student." "You're still a student? But you're already an adult. You have a job. I saw you on TV." Lan Xian scratched her head and said confusedly, "Hehe, Xianair, my little auntie is still a student. She's a college student, and we're elementary school students." She explained for her friend enthusiastically. She seemed to know more. "But Xianair, let me tell you, it's not because my little auntie is older than us that she's a college student." But at this time, Yang Chongui and Dong Yue came out. Shishi didn't have time to explain to Lan Xian. She cheered and threw herself at her grandpa, who loved her very much. "Ah, wait Shishi, you haven't finished yet." "Why is that?" Lan Xian heard half of the story and became anxious. She asked loudly. Shishi hugged her grandpa's hand and turned around. She continued to say excitedly, "Hee." "Xianair, it's because my little auntie is a college student." Then While the explanation was going on, Mo Fei also got out of the car with little Momo in her arms. Little Momo couldn't remember what Grandpa's house looked like. While holding her mother's neck nervously, she looked around with her big eyes and looked at her grandma, who came up to greet her with a smile. Oh right, Xiao Suao also saw a little boy who was even younger than her, wearing open crotch pants and sitting on the tiled floor playing under the eaves behind Granny. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.